Chapter 322. On the way to the Beast City, Xiaofan listened to the slave talk about the matter. The slave could not explain it clearly. After all, in the chaos, the slaves naturally protected the slave owners and did not care about others. They would not spare extra attention to pay attention to Lei and Tuo's movements. When Xiaofan arrived at the Beast City, Su Gu's face was taut and angry. Obviously, he was in a very bad mood. Looking around, Xiaofan did not see the lizard beast that was brought out this morning. Then, he connected it to what the slave just said. Su Gu lost the beast fight. When he saw Xiaofan, Su Gu's face relaxed a little. For his partner, Xiaofan, Su Gu's attitude was still good. I don't know where they went. I sent people to look for them, but I couldn't find them. Su Gu said. He did not want to mention the previous loss of the beast fight. After the end of the beast fight, there was chaos because of the dispute between several bystanders. When the chaos was over, the slave owners left with their slaves, and Su Gu did not find Lei and Tuo. In this territory dominated by the slave owners, if the people of the tribe walked around at will, they would certainly suffer losses. Even being quietly solved was very likely. Therefore, on the first day of coming to the Beast City, Su Gu told Xiaofan and the other two. Before that, the three people were very cautious, but they did not expect such a thing to happen today. Su Gu thought that Lei and Tuo went out of the city to return to the station, or went to other places in the city to do things. In Su Gu's impression, the tribal people's style of doing things was always mysterious. However, seeing Xiaofan's reaction, Su Gu knew that these two situations were not necessarily the case. After listening to Su Gu's account, Xiaofan said, I didn't let them do things. I also believe that they would not run around at will. Something must have happened, or seen something. Where did they disappear just now? Xiaofan asked. Around here, there were only traces of the chaos on the ground. The footprints were messy, with many people and beasts' footprints. They were not far from me, but during the chaos, they were pushed away by the crowd. Carefully recalling the chaos just now, Su Gu's face changed. Just now, she was so angry that she didn't think much about it. Now that she had calmed down, the more she thought about it, the more she felt that something was wrong. She looked at Xiaofan and asked, What do you think? Xiaofan shook his head. Everything is just a suspicion. Losing the person and not paying attention to the situation during the chaos, Su Gu felt that his face was not bright. He also felt some guilt towards his partner, Xiaofan. I'll send someone to look for him. If you have tamed beasts with a keen sense of smell, bring a few of them here. It'll be easier to find people that way, Xiaofan said. Listening to Xiaofan's words, Su Gu also understood what he wanted to do. He told Wuxia to go back and bring the beasts that met the conditions. Wuxia did not say much and rushed back to bring two beasts that looked like wolves and dogs. This kind of beast's individual fighting power was not comparable to others, and it was basically not in the pit of fighting beasts. They were usually used to find runaway slaves and beasts to fight, or to find prey. When Xiaofan rushed over, he deliberately brought two pieces of clothing used by Lei and Tuo, letting them smell it. After the two beasts smelled the clothes, they sniffed the ground around them and then went straight in one direction. Over there. Su Gu's spirit was shocked. Hurry up and keep up. At the same time, Su Gu also thought, it was just that Lei and Tuo left without permission. If he found other people setting up a trap, he would never spare them. To Su Gu and Xiaofan's disappointment, the two beasts only chased for a while and then stopped. No more? Just here, I can't find them anymore. Su Gu looked around. The slave owners were riding a variety of beasts, walking back and forth with the slaves. No one stayed in the same place all the time, and he couldn't get any useful information by asking. The useful footprints on the ground had long been stepped on by other passers-by, and there were no clues. Xiaofan blew the whistle for contact, but no one responded. Until dusk, they still couldn't find anyone. After leaving the city, Xiaofan also called Cha-Cha, who had been entertaining himself near the desert, to look for them. Back at the Luoya city station, Xiaofan entered the house and saw the withered grass in the corner that had not been used. He took one out and tested it. The softness was still there. Taking a deep breath, he calmed his emotions and calmed down. Xiaofan took the withered grass and mobilized the power in his body. He looked at the hands and rope that appeared in his mind, immersing himself in it. He wanted to use this way to predict the position of Lei and Tuo. When he got out of that state, Xiaofan had a moment of dizziness. The number of times he tried to unlock the knot today was too many and consumed a lot of energy. Now, after the knot divination, he was unusually tired. Shaking his head to clear his mind, Xiaofan looked at the knot in his hand and carefully identified the conclusion on the knot. The more he looked, the tighter his brows wrinkled, and the deeper the hostility in his eyes. At this time, Su Gu came to knock on the door. Xiaofan moved the door panel and saw Su Gu standing at the door with a very bad expression. Su Gu walked into the house, not letting the slaves follow. He looked at Xiaofan and asked, "Do you have any guesses about Lei and the others?" "Baishar City," Xiaofan said briefly. Su Gu was surprised. He didn't expect Xiaofan to be able to guess. However, thinking of Xiaofan's strange prediction ability, he was relieved. Handing a piece of cloth to Xiaofan, Su Gu said, "Look at this. Someone just sent it over." The cloth was similar to the one worn by Xiaofan. It was cut from Lei and Tuo's clothes. There were only 4 words written on it: "See you at the Colosseum." Scratching his head, Su Gu didn't know what to say. He thought about it and was afraid that Xiaofan would be impulsive and go directly to the Baishar city station. He advised, "Don't go to the Baishar city station. If you go, you won't be able to come back. You can rest assured that I know," Xiaofan said. He rolled the cloth and put it aside. "This cloth is here with me." "Okay." Su Gu had no opinion. After a few more words, Su Gu left. Xiaofan thought about it all night in the room. He was not sleepy, thinking about the real intention of the other party to capture Lei and Tuo. The next day, Su Gu did not enter the Colosseum city. He was not in the mood. Knowing that it was the Baishar city people who made things difficult for him, he also held back his anger. Of the 2 enslaved fighting beasts, one was already gone, leaving only the scorpion beast. He stayed in the animal pen all day, personally watching the slaves feed the scorpion beast. He also inquired about some herbs that were said to strengthen the fighting power of the fighting beasts. Although he didn't know whether it was true or false, he still got some and found people to catch a few small desert beasts to do experiments. Xiaofan did not go over. He called back Cha-Cha, telling it not to run around and not to go to the Baishar city station site. Su Gu thought that the Baishar city people, because of the grievances between the slave owners, started with the tribesmen around him. His heart was also glad that Xiaofan did not go out that day. Xiaofan thought more about this matter. There were elements of the grievances between the 2 cities, and perhaps Dao Yu. He just didn't know what role Dao Yu played in it. Dao Yu, Xiaofan touched the hilt of the knife on his waist. Su Gu said that if Xiaofan went to the Baishar city station, he would certainly not return. Xiaofan also knew that his own strength could not support everyone in Baishar city. Moreover, since the other party sent someone to deliver the cloth, they must have taken precautions. After thinking about it all night, he did not think of a way to deal with it. Xiaofan sat in the house and continued to think. Since the other party said, "See you in the Colosseum," was it to let Lei fight the beasts? If so, before that, the 2 people were not in danger for the time being. But the Colosseum in the center of the beast city. How could they come out? Just as he was thinking, Xiaofan heard a little movement. He looked over and saw a blue beetle lying at his feet. Xiaofan stared at the beetle at his feet, thoughtful. Just as the beetle did not wait for Xiaofan's response for a long time and was about to leave, Xiaofan spoke. "Come back." The beetle took a few steps toward the hole and immediately turned and crawled back. Xiaofan leaned over and reached out to the beetle. Before, he thought about unlocking the beetle later, but now that Lei and Tuo's matter happened, Xiaofan changed his mind. He intended to unlock the first lock for the beetle. Seeing the blue flame coming out of Xiaofan's hand, the beetle seemed to know Xiaofan's intention and stayed in place. He didn't know if it was too excited, but its two hind legs gently kicked on the ground. It was a habit of pushing the ball for a long time, and when it was excited, it would be like this. Chapter 323. Recently, in Wuxia City, the slaves responsible for taking care of the fighting beasts found that the insects in the animal pen were somewhat wrong. The so-called soil and water raised the insects. The slaves who specialized in taking care of the animal pen thought that they were still very experienced. They also knew very well about the beetles that often appeared in the animal pen to clean up the waste. But this time, the movements of the insects made them puzzled. A few days ago, they suddenly disappeared en masse, and they did not care. Then, the waste in the animal pen began to decrease, and the insects were more. They could often see the small beetles active in the animal pen. In this regard, the slaves were quite happy. There was less waste to deal with, and they were much more relaxed. Sometimes they could find a few large dung balls. However, this situation did not last long before it changed again. The waste in the animal pen increased again, and the beetles that were originally active in the animal pen were less. Moreover, this change was still continuing. Where did the beetles go? The slaves who cleaned up the animal pen were puzzled. In a certain animal pen, 2 slaves had just cleaned up the waste in the animal pen and sat next to the animal pen to rest. "How do I feel that there are more and more of these wastes?" a slave complained. "I think so too. It may be because the Colosseum is about to open. These days, there are more things to feed, and the fighting beasts are more." Another slave sighed. They could only complain in private and the slave owners were not paying attention. "You say, these 2 days, how come these insects have become less?" one asked. Not far from his feet, there was a beetle crawling by, and it stretched its legs and kicked with its feet. "I don't know, it went underground for the winter." "Who cares, we just have to take care of the fighting beasts." "That's also." "Oh." A slave who was playing with the beetle with his feet screamed. "What's wrong?" He was startled by the cry of his companion. The slave who had just screamed bent his leg and turned his foot over to look. His simple shoes made of coarse cloth and grass had a big hole in the front, and his toes were exposed. Originally, he didn't care. It was nothing to wear like this, but when he kicked the beetle with his feet, he felt a little itchy. "I don't know if it was bitten or scratched," the slave said. "He must have been scratched. These insects eat trash. How can they bite people?" The other said indifferently. They had been working in the animal pen for so many years and had lived with these insects for so many years, but they had never been bitten. "Hiss, it's actually bleeding." "It's okay. The bug only scratched me a little." The 2 slaves did not care. The other slaves who were busy working in the animal pens did not carefully observe the changes of the beetles in the animal pens. Therefore, they did not know that the beetles, who were acting more and more strangely, were gradually abandoning the excreted waste and turning to other food. On Xiaofan's side, after sending a message to Su Gu, he left the Wuxia city station. Xiaofan had a pass here and could freely enter and exit the Wuxia city station. Although he could not enter the beast city, he could still go to other places. He planned to go out. Although he might encounter people from Baishur city, he still decided to take a risk. The other party was very calm. Perhaps they had also investigated Xiao Xian's group, but Xiao Xian knew very little about them. Since the other party did not take the initiative to make a move, Xiao Xian decided to take a step first and try the other party's reaction, which would help to speculate the other party's intentions. Su Gu, who was staying in the animal pen, heard the slave's report and did not continue to stare at the scorpion beast. He didn't say where he was going. Su Gu asked the slave who came to report. No. He didn't say. He just said that he was going out for a walk. The slave trembled. He must have gone to Baishur city. Su Gu said. He did not expect that Xiao Xian would let him rest assured yesterday, but today he ran away so quickly. He also counted on Xiao Xian to help him a few more times. He could not be slaughtered by the Baishur city people so early. After Xiao Xian left, he sat on Chacha's back. He first flew a few laps around the Luoya city station to familiarize himself with the terrain. Chacha was already very familiar with this place, but Xiao Xian also wanted to see it himself. After looking around, Xiao Xian let Chacha fly in the direction of Baishur city for a while. The closer they were, the more cautious they were. After seeing the Baishur city station, Xiao Xian let Chacha temporarily stop and hover in place. A shadow flew from the Baishur city station. It was a bird, slightly smaller than Chacha. It did not look as strong as Chacha, but its speed was very fast. From the beginning of the takeoff, it had been moving at a very fast speed towards Xiao Xian. There were also people on the bird's back. A chill suddenly rose, and Xiao Xian's heart was alerted. Go! Xiao Xian patted Chacha, signaling it to withdraw. A few more shadows appeared around them. They suddenly appeared from the ground below. There were some undulating small sand dunes around them. They should have dug a hiding place in the sand dunes. 1, 2, 3, 5, 10. A total of 10 birds took off from the ground, forming an encirclement. Fortunately, Xiao Xian did not let Chacha get closer to Baishur city. He withdrew quickly and was not surrounded. Xiao Xian's body was low, paying attention to the surrounding pursuers. These people seemed to be deliberately waiting for him. Probably last time they only caught Lei and Tua, and he was the only one left, so they waited for him to come to their door. The warning in his heart rose again, stronger than before. Xiao Xian had a feeling of being locked on. Whoosh, an arrow came through the wind. It was shot by the person on the back of the bird that rose from Baishur city. If it was an average person, the main target would be Chacha, but the other party was not. The target was Xiao Xian. After perceiving the threat, Xiao Xian signaled Chacha to dodge. He himself also pulled out his knife, guarding against it. The arrow almost brushed past his arm, passing through his body with a cold wind. It was like a stirred-up storm, blowing painfully. The sleeve that swayed with the wind was also pierced with a hole. Although it just passed through the sleeve and did not directly touch the skin of the arm, if Xiao Xian lifted up the sleeve at this moment, he would certainly find that there was already a mark there. If it was slightly broken, it would bleed. While dodging, Xiao Xian quickly looked at the pursuers behind him. Although it flashed past, Xiao Xian felt that the pursuer behind him, the one who shot the arrow with absolute killing intent, was Dao Yu. The prediction of the target's behavior, as well as the decisiveness of the shot, proved that this was a shrewd hunter, a killer who had hunted countless prey. The strength of the arrow shot was even more powerful. It was definitely not under the Tianshan tribe, who were good at using bows and arrows. It was even a notch higher. In addition to Dao Yu, the other pursuers also carried a bow, aiming at Cha-Cha. Cha-Cha needed to constantly avoid the arrows that were shot. Fortunately, the arrows shot by those people were not as good as Dao Yu in terms of strength, speed, and accuracy. Otherwise, Cha-Cha may not be able to successfully avoid them. Even if he was facing Dao Yu alone, Xiaoxian felt quite a bit of pressure, not to mention that there were more than 10 people chasing this side. The second arrow flew straight to the back of Xiaoxian's head. Xiaoxian's wrist moved, and the blade was slightly slanted. Clang! After the arrow touched the blade, because of the angle of the blade, it was bounced in the other direction. Xiaoxian could clearly feel the moment the tip of the arrow touched the stone knife, the stone chip splashed on the knife. The wrist holding the handle of the knife was hurt, and the knife almost fell out of his hand. His arm was still tingling. Not to mention the strong bow, Dao Yu himself should have reached the level of a senior totem warrior. How long had it been? From the time he betrayed Yan Ji until now, it had only been more than 10 years. At that time, Dao Yu was just a wanderer, but now he could improve so quickly. Even if it was a totem warrior in the tribe, without the help of the fire crystal, before the fire seed was reignited in the old land, very few people could reach his speed of improvement. Dao Yu was still waiting to shoot the third arrow, but looking at the figure in front of him that was getting farther and farther away, he had already put the bow on the string and stopped. Shooting again would be a waste of arrows. These arrows, each of them were made with precious consumables, and he did not want to waste them at this time. When he removed the arrow, Dao Yu raised his hand, and the several eagles behind him also stopped, no longer continuing to chase. "Don't chase?" someone asked. "He's just a coward." "There's no need to waste any more effort," another person said. "It's a pity that we couldn't catch them. When the time comes, let the 3 Yanjiao people play together, that would be better. It must be very interesting." The people who came over laughed and glanced at Dao Yu's face. Seeing that Dao Yu seemed to be in a good mood, they asked, "What do you think?" As slaves, their level was not as good as Dao Yu's. They really had to be under Dao Yu's control. Therefore, when Dao Yu let them ambush here, even if it was freezing outside for a day, they did not dare to complain. They could only say it in their hearts. They knew that this person's means were good. If they offended him, they would not see tomorrow's sun. For Xiaoxian, who had escaped from their hunting range, Dao Yu's evaluation was an understatement of nothing more than this. His tone was filled with pride and complacency that he usually would not reveal. So what if he was a totem warrior? Wasn't he still suppressed by him, a wanderer? For Xiaoxian, in fact, Dao Yu did not know much about him. He only knew that the 2 people he caught seemed to listen to Xiaoxian's orders. Looking at Xiaoxian's age, he believed that Xiaoxian was a descendant of a tribe leader, just like several other tribes. Find someone to keep an eye on Wuxia City and see that kid's movements. Dao Yu said. Yes. The people next to him quickly responded. Are you worried that he will go to other tribes for help? Someone asked. Dao Yu smiled contemptuously, other tribes? Except for the few who were caught, the others are very busy. How can they manage the Yanjiao people? As for the Yanjiao tribe, it's too far away. The few people who were caught, they can only wait for death. What if the kid who escaped rushed into the Colosseum? One person asked. That's even better. Dao Yu's smile deepened. In the Colosseum, it was a battle of life and death. The fighting beasts that could be put into the Colosseum, which one was easy to deal with? Even last year, when he entered the Colosseum, he made all kinds of preparations in advance. His strength was comparable to the general tribe's senior totem warriors, but he still paid a big price. How could those totem warriors, who were only at the intermediate level, escape? Chapter 324. After Xiaoxian broke away from the chase, he found a place to check Cha-Cha's injuries. He determined that it was not a big problem, just missing a few feathers, and took off again. He did not immediately return to the Wuxia city station, but instead looked around the beast-fighting desert, looking for a place with little human and beast activity. Other than the liveliness when the various cities came over, there were many places in this snowy desert where there were very few human and beast activities. Moreover, with the imminent opening of the animal fighting coliseum, there were fewer and fewer people going out for activities. For Xiaofan, this was a good thing. He needed a quiet place where no one would disturb and no one would pay attention to him to break through. Yes, Xiaofan felt the barrier. When he practiced the enslavement method, he felt it. Yesterday, when he unlocked the first lock on the beetle, that feeling was even more obvious. The totem pattern on his arm was already very close to his wrist. It seemed that as long as he waited for a while, he could rush over. If it was a normal time, Xiaofan would take a well-prepared attitude, but now the situation was different. Especially after a brief meeting with Dao Yu, the decision in his heart became more and more firm. He must break through this barrier as soon as possible. Dao Yu had the intention to kill them. After the incident just now, Xiaofan had already determined that. He just did not know how Lei and Tuo were now. Were they still safe? If Dao Yu just wanted them to enter the Colosseum, their lives would not be in danger for the time being. Shaking his head, Xiaofan knew that the most important thing for him now was to break through first. Even if he was special compared to others, he had killed more than one senior totem warrior. But after all, there were some skills and coincidences, and there was no absolute suppression. Especially in this place, an intermediate totem warrior was really not enough to look at. Only by breaking through, there would be more opportunities to save Lei and Tuo. Back at the Luoya city station, Su Gu saw that Xiaofan was safe and sound, so he was relieved. "Are we going to the beast fighting city?" Xiaofan asked. "Yes. I heard that someone in Baishur city just took a fighting beast to the city. Just in time, I'll clean them up." Su Gu ordered the slaves to take the scorpion beast and prepare to enter the city to fight. Xiaofan packed up and followed Su Gu into the beast city again. When Dao Yu received the report from his men, he still felt that it was inconceivable. That kid had eaten a loss in the morning, but in the afternoon, he dared to run to the beast city again? Wasn't he afraid of ending up like his two companions? "Otherwise, I'll find someone to teach him a lesson," a person beside Dao Yu said. Although he said that he was going to teach him a lesson, the posture of his hands was like he was going to kill him. Dao Yu straightened his new flowery clothes and didn't care. "Up to you." He was now mainly thinking about how to please the White Stone King, rather than spending more energy to pay attention to other people. At this time, in the Beast City, Su Gu was fighting with a young master of Baishur city. Su Gu's fighting spirit was high. He looked at the Baishur people's eyes that were spitting fire. Your father, don't care about others, I'm going to fight with you guys from White Stone City." It seemed to feel Su Gu's anger. Although the scorpion beast usually did not give Su Gu much face in the animal pen, in the beast fighting pit, its state made Su Gu very satisfied. The other side's fighting beast had been guarding against the scorpion's tail. Who knew that this scorpion's fighting style was completely different from the scorpion beasts it had won before? It came up with a few fierce pincers. He didn't know if it was because when it was locked in the beast fighting ring, it was stimulated by Xiaofan and enslaved by Su Gu. This scorpion beast had a belly full of anger. Finally, it waited for a place where it could freely vent, and directly exploded. That fierce strength, that big pincer waving, it did not use the stinger on its tail. Xiaofan did not always stay next to the beast fighting pit. He walked around nearby, especially in the place where someone was enslaved on the spot. He felt the enslavement of the slave owners in each city at a close distance. At this time, the blue flame in Xiaofan's mind was very active. Most of the enslavement methods used by the slave owners in different places were actually the same, with only a few differences. When Xiaofan felt these small differences, he also followed the simulation, keeping the blue flame in his mind active, or even more active. This was good for his breakthrough, which was why he chose to enter the city. While observing the slave owner's enslavement, Xiaofan also noticed that someone was following him. Several sneak attacks were avoided by him. Here, he would not easily reveal his totem patterns, nor would he unscrupulously fight here. In the territory of the slave owners, it was better for the tribesmen to be low-key. Just as Xiaofan approached the beast fighting pit where Su Gu was at this time, the fight in the pit had just ended. Seeing Su Gu laugh and let the slaves hurry down to check the scorpion beast's injuries, Xiaofan knew that he had won. Just as the people around the beast fighting pit were discussing the fight just now, there was a sudden disturbance. Not far away, a tall fighting beast like a giant bear suddenly went crazy. The slaves who originally controlled it somehow made a mistake, letting the fighting beast break away from its shackles and rush into the crowd, just in the direction of Su Gu's beast fighting pit. The giant bear rushed very fast, and every foot was like a meteor falling to the ground. The ground shook with the roar, hitting the people's nerves. The slaves only cared about protecting their slave owners and did not care about other things. The surrounding small riding beasts screamed and ran around. When their wool was different from the people riding on their backs, it became even more chaotic. A man riding a big gerbil pulled the rope, indicating the gerbil to run to the left. However, the gerbil's reaction was to run to the right in a hurry. Under this divergence of left and right, there was a moment of pause. The man and the beast continued to compete. When the result of the competition came out, they turned around and collided with the people and the riding beasts behind them. The crowd that had gathered around the beast fighting pit ran and roared. Among them, two people quickly approached the place where Xiaofan was located, one on the left and one on the right. Almost at the moment when the other party stared at Xiaofan, it triggered Xiaofan's sensitive nerves that had been stretched. With the example of Lei and Tua, Xiaofan naturally could not repeat the same mistakes. He decided to enter the city and also made preparations. At this time, he skillfully moved in the chaotic crowd. The man on the left of Xiaofan pulled out a small sharp knife and hid it behind his wrist. When he was ready to move closer, several big gerbils rushed in front of him. He could only stop and wait. When the gerbils passed, he looked again but could not find Xiaofan's figure. He was planning to look around again when a black cold light flashed in front of his eyes. He couldn't see what it was, but at that moment, there was an unspeakable sense of despair. Puff, a soft sound, in such a noisy environment, was difficult to detect. That person wanted to raise his hand to touch his neck, which was a little strange, but he found that every movement he made was as if he was stuck, halting and halting. The blood was like an open reservoir, pouring down from the throat. The bull-riding beast, which had been running, directly picked up the people in front of it with its horns. A Red Star City slave owner riding on the back of the bull did not care about the blood splashing, nor did he look at the people who were picked up. He controlled the bull under him to leave the chaotic place. Another person who was close to Xiaofan temporarily avoided the gerbils when they came over. When he looked again, he could not find Xiaofan's people. He only saw his own people being picked up by the bull. Seeing the other party fail, he did not look at it much. He felt that the other party was really stupid. The target was not killed, but he was picked up by the bull. Looking around for Xiaofan's figure, he felt a pain in his wrist, and then a sudden pull pulled him in one direction. Looking forward, the manic giant bear was coming this way. Seeing the giant bear running over, he was anxious, but the silk trapped on his wrist was very tough. He cut it with a stone knife and did not cut it. The pulling force from his wrist was still increasing, pulling him closer to the giant bear. He couldn't even find where the other end of the pulling force was. Panic, fear, horror. The struggle was futile, and the binding force on his wrist was getting tighter. Just when he was determined to cut off his wrist, it was too late. The giant bear's paw had already come. Bang! Blood splashed, and the man was sent flying. For others, it was just an insignificant person who died under the bear's paw. When everything calmed down, the chaos dispersed, leaving only a mess. After another day, probably no one would talk about it. Chapter 325. Su Gu was also worried that Xiaoxian, like Lei and Tua, would disappear in the chaos. When he saw that Xiaoxian was safe and sound, Su Gu's heart was relieved. "Are you okay?" Su Gu asked, pointing to Xiaoxian's shoulder. "What's that?" Xiaoxian looked sideways and saw a steel needle-like white line piercing his clothes. This was not the wire he had just used. He pulled it out and looked at it, suddenly saying, "Oh, it should be a gerbil's beard. How did the gerbil's beard get on your body?" Su Gu was puzzled. During the chaos, those gerbils did not run slowly, so how did their beards get cut off? He did not know which gerbil was so unlucky. Seeing that Xiaoxian was okay, Su Gu focused his attention on the victorious scorpion beast brought out by the slaves. Because of the sudden chaos, he could not get his spoils. He could only wait for the next time he saw the people of Baishur city. The time was not early, so Su Gu did not stay in the beast city for a long time. He took the people and beasts back. After returning to the Luoya city station, Xiaoxian ate something, took a little rest, and then rode the eagle away. He needed to find a place to try to break through. Xiaoxian let Cha-Cha fly out of the beast-fighting desert. At the edge of the desert, he looked down and saw the high sand dunes undulating like waves in a sea of sand. There was no human activity at the border, and even the desert beasts that came out were very few. "It's here." Xiaoxian let Cha-Cha go down. Xiaoxian finally chose a place in the middle of two sand dunes. As long as it was not in the air, people in the distance could not see this side. Cha-Cha rested on the top of the sand dune, responsible for guarding. Night fell. Above the vast desert, two moons that were close to round hung high in the sky. As the full moon night approached, the two moons were closer. Above the beast-fighting desert, the white snow reflected the moonlight, making the desert look like a real ice field, making people forget that this was actually just a desert. Everything in the surroundings could be seen clearly under the moonlight. If one stood on the sand ridge, they could even see many small animals that came out at night. Xiaoxian sat on the sand and closed his eyes to feel the totemic flame in his mind. The totem power in his body began to move, seeping into every meridian and blood vessel, flowing along with his blood. Compared to intermediate totem warriors, senior totem warriors were much stronger. Therefore, whether it was their bones, muscles, meridians, or blood vessels, they would all change under the influence of totem power in order to bear more power. Under normal circumstances, such a change would happen after a few days of accumulation. Even with the help of the fire crystal, the change would not be too drastic. As for the fire crystal, it was a gentle change for the totem warriors, and the backlash was not strong. This was why the tribesmen valued the fire crystal so much. Unfortunately, Xiaoxian could not break through with the help of the fire crystal. When the tribesman used the fire crystal to upgrade, he could only use the fire crystal to relieve fatigue, and could not go further. But now, there was also an opportunity. In his mind, the totem flame rolled up, and the flame body was getting higher and higher. Among them, the red and blue flames were very obvious, surrounding the two-horned totem and expanding outwards. With the change of the totem flame, every trace of totem power in his body was like a surging river, suddenly erupting, scouring and flowing. Impact. Impact. Impact again. His meridians were widened and strengthened, and every muscle was also changing. The pain caused by the forceful impact was obvious. It was as if there was a fierce battle going on inside his body. Xiaoxian's body felt like it was pierced by thousands of needles. His muscles twitched and large drops of sweat appeared on his forehead. Even breathing became difficult. His arms, which were covered by his sleeves, had already swelled up. If he rolled up his sleeves, he could see the dragon-like meridians on his arms. The totem tattoos on his body, including the ones on his face and other parts of his body, had all changed from the original dark color to the color of flames. Just like when Xiaoxian awakened his totem power by the fire pit, at first glance, it looked like it was drawn by hot magma. The fiery totem tattoos extended along his arms, rushing past his elbows, passing through his forearms, and all the way to his wrists, where there seemed to be a solid wall blocking the lava flow from rushing over. The totem tattoos on Xiaoxian's body became brighter and brighter, as if they were accumulating power, ready to go. On the high sand dune, Cha-Cha was vigilantly watching the surroundings. At this time, if someone came to sneak attack, Xiaoxian would be in danger. Not only would his breakthrough fail, but he would also be seriously injured. Suddenly, Cha-Cha heard some movement. Its sharp gaze swept towards a place, not far from where Xiaoxian was sitting. Cha-Cha silently spread its wings and approached that place. If there was anything that was disadvantageous to Xiaoxian, it would rush over with all its might. But if it was just some unimportant small beast, it could not act recklessly, as it would disturb Xiaoxian's breakthrough. On the sandy ground, the sand on the surface was lifted, and a few thin claws stretched out from the ground, followed by a small head, and then a worm the size of a small watermelon. Cha-Cha had seen this worm before, the one that often rolled balls. Xiaoxian had told Cha-Cha not to worry about the worm, so after seeing it, Cha-Cha retracted its wings. The beetle circled around Xiaoxian's body, but did not approach, as if it was afraid of the airflow and power around Xiaoxian's body. Perhaps it also knew that it was not the time to say hello, so after circling once, it found a place to stay. Today, it did not find any trace of Xiaoxian in the Luoya city station. After leaving the station, it sensed Xiaoxian's position and directly came to find him. Xiaoxian's breakthrough was not short, starting from the fall of the night until dawn. Cha-Cha stretched its neck, stretched its stiff body, took off, and checked at a low altitude. After confirming that there were no other people or dangerous beasts, it landed and continued to wait. Looking around, Cha-Cha found that the worm had run to the other side of the sand dune. Because this was the border area, one side of the sand dune was only yellow sand, and the other side was sand covered with snow. At this time, the beetle was rolling a snowball, walking upside down, kicking the snowball with its two legs. When the sun shone on the sand dune, Xiaoxian opened his eyes and breathed a long sigh of relief. He was sweating, and when the wind blew, it seemed cold. Looking up at the sand ridge, Cha-Cha was standing there, and in addition to it, there was also the beetle. This worm had found him. Looking around the totem flame in his mind, Xiaoxian found that where the blue flame was active, a line extended, and one end of the line was connected to a small spark. This spark was probably the worm. This was the first time Xiaoxian clearly felt the connection between master and slave. Before the breakthrough, he was aware of it, but it was not as clear as now. He didn't know what the big slave owners were like. After enslaving so many slaves, would they be able to separate thousands of threads from the flame? If it was cut, what would happen? After all, he was not an authentic slave owner, and Xiaoxian was not sure if he was the same as other slave owners. Now, he would not cut the line between him and the beetle. When Xiaoxian looked over, the beetle had just pushed a snowball over the sand ridge, and the snowball rolled down the steep slope of the sand dune. When it rolled past Xiaoxian, Xiaoxian reached out to block it. Just after the breakthrough, Xiaoxian did not control the strength used to block it, and the snowball in his hand cracked. There was a lot of sand on the snowball, and the surface of the snowball could not be seen, but after it cracked, Xiaoxian found that there was a small lizard hidden in the snowball. Looking at the lizard that was no longer moving in the snowball, Xiaoxian looked doubtfully at the blue beetle running down the sand dune. When did this thing start killing lizards? Did the recipe change? Shaking his head, Xiaoxian did not continue to study it. Looking at the sky, Xiaoxian got up and stretched his limbs. Although there was still some tingling in his body, he could clearly feel the strength. He adjusted his body slightly and wanted to look up and scream, but he held back. This place was not suitable. Let's go back. With that, Xiaoxian swung his legs and ran over the sand dune, running into the snow. He did not ride the eagle, but ran back completely on 2 legs. He could feel the improvement of his strength, the change in his body's strength, and the majestic power in his body. As he ran, he could feel the changes in his body more clearly. Chapter 326. After Xiaoxian returned to the Luoya City station, he asked Su Gu to pass the message that he wanted to talk to Luoya City's king, Su Luan. Knowing that Xiaoxian wanted to talk to Su Luan about Lei and Tua, Su Gu agreed. He could still help with this. From the beginning, Xiaoxian rarely saw the king. The kings of the cities were not like the other small slave owners, who went to the Colosseum pit to gamble all day long. For the king, fighting in the Colosseum pit was simply shameful. The only thing that could match them was the huge Colosseum. The fighting beasts used for the Colosseum in Luoya City were in the other direction of the station, separated from the fighting beasts of the small slave owners. Every day, there were people who trained them. Because of the wind, people and beasts in the upwind could not smell the thick bloody smell, but if they walked over, it would be obvious. Su Gu went to Su Luan's side and came back not long after. "Father is busy. He said he won't see you." Su Gu helplessly told Xiaoxian. Xiaoxian frowned. Su Luan did not want to see him. He originally wanted to talk to Su Luan about what to do if he met Lei and Tua in the Colosseum, but now it seemed that this road was blocked. Looking at Xiaoxian's reaction, Su Gu continued, "Although my father won't see you, I told him about Lei and Tua. My father said that as long as you can beat the Baishur city's fighting beasts, he will solve the other things. You don't have to worry about Baishur's side making things difficult." Seeing that Xiaoxian did not speak, Su Gu thought that Xiaoxian had given up. After all, it was the Colosseum. It was not something that ordinary people could go down to fight. Even the slaves who went down were the slave owners' right-hand men. Every year, more than half of the people who went down could not come out again. Last year, when Dao Yu went down, many people were not optimistic. Many people saw him as a joke. They bet on Luoya City's fighting beasts to win, but did not think that Dao Yu could come out alive. It was simply a direct slap in the face of Luoya City's people. He heard that afterward, Su Luan also sent people to assassinate Dao Yu. Unfortunately, it was not successful. Instead, he was often assassinated by people over there. Alas, forget it. Su Luan said, "If it were me, I wouldn't have come here." "I'll go," Xiaoxian said. "It's good that you know. If you go, you'll lose your life." "What did you say?" Su Gu picked his ear, looking at Xiaoxian, and asked with uncertainty. "I said I'll go. I'll have to trouble you to talk to the Luoya king again," Xiaoxian said. Su Gu's face was hard to understand and had an expression of, "You idiot," but seeing that Xiaoxian really made a decision, he no longer tried to persuade him. He sighed in his heart, the people of the tribe are really a bunch of people who want to die. However, let me say this first. Although Father said before that if you can defeat the White Stone City's battle beasts, everything will be easy, but he may not really agree to let you go on stage. You know, we don't get along well with the people of Baishur City. Last year, we lost a game. Father is angry in his heart. This year, he will definitely send more powerful slaves down, or directly let his riding beast go down. Otherwise, if we lose again, he will be angry. Well, I know. If he was rejected again, Xiaoxian could only think of another way. Can't you predict? Can you predict what will happen after the Colosseum opens? Su Gu asked. Xiaofan shook his head. He tried, but he couldn't. What came out was a mess, not a knot, indicating that he couldn't divine this matter. However, Xiaofan always felt that something would happen. This feeling made Xiaofan feel very powerless. It was like being in a thick fog, seemingly aware of something in front of him, but unable to see clearly. Su Gu once again entered the two-story building where Su Luan was. He originally thought that Su Luan would once again reject him, but to Su Gu's surprise, Su Luan actually agreed. He also said that when the time came, he would arrange for Xiaofan to go on stage depending on the situation. This time, Su Gu couldn't guess his father's thoughts. Xiaofan also couldn't see Su Luan's intentions, but the Colosseum would open tomorrow. Lei and Tuo would most likely be arranged by the people of Baishur City. If he wanted to save them, he could either rob them in advance, or directly fight, and then use the manpower of the Wuxia City King to sweep away the trouble. Both were risky, so he could only act according to the circumstances. Before that, he had to prepare more. That afternoon, Xiaofan stayed in the house most of the time. Su Gu asked the slaves around what Xiaofan did. The slaves couldn't say why. They only said that Xiaofan came out a few times, as if he was looking for something. After picking it up, he went back. What did he pick up? Su Gu asked. The slave who was asked carefully thought about it and replied, "It's like a branch? Or a stone?" Then he gestured. Su Gu was disappointed to let the slave leave. He wanted to ask Xiaofan what he was doing, but then he remembered that Xiaofan said today that he shouldn't bother him. After 2 steps, Su Gu turned again. He still wanted to see how the clothes for tomorrow were prepared. Tomorrow was an important day. No one knew what Xiaofan was doing, and no one in the station cared. Except for the people patrolling around, the focus was on the Colosseum. The next day, the Wuxia City team set out from the station to the Colosseum. Wuxia City King Su Luan was still sitting on his riding beast, but this time, he was not alone. He was also holding a woman, and the two people showed intimacy. Although Xiaofan couldn't see clearly because of the curtain, he could tell what was happening just by listening to the sounds. The woman was from Shaki City, the half-sister of the current Shaki king. He didn't know if the two people hooked up after coming here, or if they had been in contact for a long time. There were also intermarriages between the cities. The communication between the slave owners was generally good, except for when they became enemies. Su Gu saw his father holding another woman intimately, showing quite calmness. Anyway, it was not the first time. If he could have a bigger riding beast, he would certainly take the beautiful female slave he had just enslaved to do the same thing. No, the female slave's grade was too low. Today, it would be too shameful to take her with him, not worthy of his identity as a young master. A few days ago, the Skywheel City girl who lost to him in a gambling fight was good. Her temper was the same as their Skywheel City's Skywheel Pillar, full of thorns. Or the one in Red Star City. It was still not suitable. That woman did not look good. Xiaofan glanced at Su Gu's fanciful expression and focused his attention on the slave owners of the other cities. After entering the city, he clearly felt that the atmosphere was different from usual. There was a kind of forbearance eagerness. The little slave owners who were arrogant and domineering in the past few days were very well behaved today. The Skywheel City girl who pulled out a knife against Xiaofan and Su Gu a few days ago looked very quiet today. When they were close to the Colosseum, Xiaofan saw the people of Baishur City. He did not see Lei and Tuo, but there was a big box in the team over there. He didn't know if the person was locked in that wooden box. Unfortunately, there were too many people here. Xiaofan could not find a chance to move the box. The people of Wuxia City and Baishur City were full of gunpowder when they met. If it were not for the arrival of Rock Tomb City, they would probably do a warm-up first. In the team of Rock Tomb City, on the huge riding beast, Xiaofan also saw an acquaintance. Although he had not seen him for a few years, his shiny golden hair was too eye-catching. Shu, the slave owner that Xiaofan met when he was looking for Yan Shua, was also one of the young masters of Rocktomb City. As usual, if the people of the three major cities came, they had priority. The people of the other cities naturally had to give way first. At this time, no one noticed that when Shu's riding beast passed by, Dao Yu, who was standing on the Baisher king's riding beast, slightly bowed his head, as if to salute. Chapter 327. Xiaofan followed Su Gu and the others into the Colosseum. In the huge Colosseum made of stones, the edge was a grandstand, while the middle of nearly 10,000 square meters was sunken. It was similar to the pit in the Beast City, but the scale here was larger and the structure was more exquisite. The huge sunken pit reminded Xiaofan of the original pit in Bat Mountain. The pit walls were surrounded by huge stones. Looking at the stone quality, it was at least above average. For many slaves who could not even use good stone, the construction here was simply extravagant. The kings of each city took their own slave owners and slaves to their respective places to sit down. In the place where the king was, there was a special installation of hanging cloth, used to shade the sun or block the snow. A few carved bamboos were propped up there, and the slaves quickly put the cloth over them. Even if there was no sun today, it could still block the wind and snow. The people who presided over this beast fighting game were naturally the kings from the three major cities. They took turns to preside over it every year, and this year it was Snowfield City's turn. The Snowfield City's king first sent people to the big slave owners of each city to arrange the order of fighting beasts. Su Gu went to Su Luan's side to take a look, and then made a forefinger gesture to Xiaofan. In other words, today, Baisher City's arranged fighting beast was the fourth to appear. The first one is the opening battle arranged by Snowfield City itself. It was actually arranged by the Snowfield City's young master. Su Gu exclaimed. In the arrangement of the sequence, the others were not written in detail, only a serial number. Only the opening battle was written in great detail, which almost made the Snowfield City's young master fly. Although the battle in the Colosseum was only the entertainment of the big slave owners, the slaves used it to fight for merits. However, for the slave owners, especially those who were interested in competing for the throne, they would also use this method to prove their strength in front of their fathers. If they won, their faces would also be bright. After the Snowfield City's king announced the start, the field was quiet. Rumble, in the pit, the sound of the huge stone slab door lifting sounded. Xiaofan listened to the sound of the heavy stone door and looked at the huge stone slab. He was sure that the stone slab was at least of high quality, even better than the stones on the walls of the pit. Such a good stone would definitely be used to make weapons in the tribe, but here, the slave owners only used it to make a door. That was a whole piece of high-quality stone, not pieced together. It was not easy to find such a piece of stone. Compared to the weapons in the hands of most of the middle and lower-class slaves, and then looking at the facilities in the Colosseum, if the tribesmen were here, they would certainly not be able to understand the thinking of the slave owners. Wasn't this a waste? It was simply extravagant. After the heavy stone door was opened, there was no huge ferocious beast. Instead, there was a man with a golden body that was much brighter than the golden fur that Shu wore. That was the young master of Snowfield City who played in the opening battle. When Xiaofan saw the Snowfield young master, he was stunned and shocked. It was not that the Snowfield City young master looked intimidating, but that dazzling equipment made Xiaofan quite surprised. Anyone who suddenly saw a person wearing metal armor in an environment full of Stone Age equipment would have the same reaction. Before, when Xiaofan saw the piece of gold that Su Gu treated as a treasure, he wondered if there was a metal mine here. After all, from the beginning to the present, Xiaofan had not found a metal ore suitable for smelting. Originally, He thought that the stone in this world was different. There was no ore, and even if there was, it would be difficult to distinguish, so he gave up looking for a metal mine. In the desert, Xiaofan did not see Su Gu and the other slave owners use metal equipment. Even the knife was the same as Xiaofan's stone knife, but the style was gorgeous. But now, Xiaofan's original idea collapsed. The Snowfield City young master wore an almost golden armor and held a big axe in his hand. It was also similar to the golden color. The axe body was engraved with some patterns, and the blade was curved. Gold? No, it couldn't be gold. Was it bronze? Thinking of this, Xiaofan's heart suddenly set off waves. Bronze, could it be that there was a metal mine in Snowfield City? He looked at the other slave owners. In addition to envy and jealousy, there was no shock, including Su Gu. This showed that they all knew that there was such a metal. What, are you stupid? Su Gu saw Xiaofan's expression and laughed. That is made of stone. It's just that, almost 99% of the stones are in the hands of the 3 major cities. Oregon ores that could smelt metal were in the hands of the 3 major cities. However, where did those ores come from? Do you think those are crazy? Su Gu looked at the dazzling armor and axe of the Snowfield City young master in the field. His eyes flashed with strong envy and jealousy as he murmured, "Power, powerful strength." Thinking of something, Su Gu lowered his voice and said to Xiaofan, "Although outside of the 3 major cities, there are also people in other cities, many of them are gifts from the 3 major cities. They are also in the hands of the kings of the cities. My father's sword is one of them. And you, the tribesmen, are thinking about it." Xiaofan's eyelids jumped. Su Gu's words meant that the other tribes were thinking about the metal ores of the 3 major cities. No wonder he always felt that those tribes who came to the desert had some secrets. It seemed that one of the secrets was these metals. In the field, the Snowfield City young master was wearing a golden armor, holding a battle axe and howling to the sky. The people of the other cities had not yet responded, but the people of Snowfield City immediately followed up with a howl, cheering for their own young master. The howl was always inspiring. Rumble, in the field, the opposite heavy stone door opened. A giant beast with a back nearly 10 meters high walked into the field from the other side of the door. Its thick limbs and fat body looked thick and heavy. It looked like a hornless rhinoceros. Every time it took a step, there would be a bang, and the ground in the field would be shaken up. The green skin was somewhat dry and cracked, not knowing if it was because of the climate or other reasons. "Hey!" Xiaofan heard someone whisper to Su Gu, "That beast doesn't seem to be as powerful as it looks." Not only the people of Wuxia City, but the people of other cities also saw it. This beast just looked big. In terms of aggression and threat, it was not comparable to other fighting beasts that could appear in the Colosseum. Moreover, this beast was mostly vegetarian. They didn't know where the Snowfield people got this beast, but it could not live in the desert. Some people despised it. No wonder the Snowfield City young master dared to carry the opening battle. They dared to find such a fierce beast. However, the people of Snowfield City refuted, "You can go, Even if this beast is just a facade, what about it? At least our Snowfield City young master dares to play." The satirists immediately shut up. Even if it was a relatively weak beast, it was still a fierce beast. It was very risky to go down and fight. If they were crushed by the thick fat legs, they would become a meat patty. If they really fought, the people in the stands would have no time to rescue them. They still cherished their lives more. Bang! 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 The huge body walked into the field. Probably because it was not used to the atmosphere here, the giant beast roared, as if it was demonstrating. The beast's thunderous roar sounded in the Colosseum. It was as if they had heard a signal. Before the roar of the beast stopped, the young slave owners in the stands began to cry out in a strange manner. Ah dash, woo 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 woo. Kill, kill. Although the people of other cities saw the Snowfield City young master's nouveau riche gold equipment, as well as the seemingly fierce beast, they had some ideas in their hearts. However, in the roar of other people, their emotions were also driven. At this time, what was the point of thinking so much? It was better to enjoy the fun here. Even the young female slave owners, who had pretended to be well-behaved all morning, screamed out. For a time, the whole field was like boiling water, and the atmosphere was warm. Each big slave owner brought in about 1,000 people here. There were more people in the 3 major cities, so there were nearly 10,000 people. In the circular Colosseum, the sound waves were like a vortex, as if to suck everyone in. The people in the stands, even if they were calm, would be affected by such an atmosphere and would no longer be calm. Chapter 328. There was no snow on this day, and the sun was high in the sky. Where the big slave owners sat, the tarpaulin covering Yangguang and the surrounding flags painted with the city's symbols were fluttering in the wind. In the field, Yangguang was glowing with golden light. He swung the axe in his hand and faced the behemoth. One step at a time, each blow seemed to use the strength of his whole body. A series of steps, each step was extremely strong. The sound of footsteps on the ground came one after another. There were behemoths, and there were also beasts. Like the beating of war drums, it added a bit of awe and shock to the battlefield. Although Snowfield City arranged this opening battle, there was a suspicion that it was a show. However, the next beast-fighting young master of Snowfield City did have his strength. He had strength and knew how to fight flexibly. After chopping, he would avoid the counterattack of the behemoth. The armor on the important parts of his body would block the cracked stones on the wall. Because the ground of the battlefield in the middle of the Colosseum was full of sand, it was also called a sand field by the slave owners. The sand in the sand field was screened. It was some sand with relatively large particles. Even in the desert sandstorm, it would fly close to the ground. It would not be like the sand in the Colosseum that could float lightly, which would interfere with the viewing. The good battle that the slave owners thought of must be blood-stained in the battlefield. The more it was dyed, the better. Otherwise, it would be considered a failed battle. In the sand field, the sand was shaken up and hit the surrounding walls, making a rainstorm-like sound. The axe blade chopped on the behemoth, leaving a blood-red scar. On the huge body of the behemoth, the blood was like a spring, flowing into the sand of the Colosseum. Madness, in this wide Colosseum, and the shouts and cheers of the slave owners in the stands, brewed and broke out. The behemoth finally roared unwillingly and fell to the ground. The young master of Snowfield City raised his axe and shouted as he walked around the Colosseum. The golden armor had been stained red with the blood of the behemoth. Like an Azura in the killing field, the young master of Snowfield City looked quite overbearing and arrogant. When the Snowfield City's great slave owner, the Snowfield King, saw this scene, he smiled with satisfaction. How could the person who would inherit his throne in the future not have any strength? Today's battle was to let everyone see more of the future Snowfield King. No matter what other people think, anyway, the Snowfield King thinks that his child is more capable than other families. The complacency on his face has not disappeared until the start of the next battle. Just as everyone was discussing the future Snowfield King who had just finished the beast battle, in the Rock Tomb City's grandstand area, Shu was holding a delicate wine glass and slowly tasting the wine inside. Hearing the discussions around him, he did not express his opinion. He just smiled, as if he did not care about the peer who was in the limelight. The first round ended perfectly. After a little cleaning up, the second round began. Most of the young slave owners liked to watch the competition between beasts. It was exciting to watch, but the older ones preferred to watch the battle between humans and beasts. Therefore, Many slaves who were ambitious and wanted to climb up the ranks began to cater to his interests and spontaneously stood up to express their willingness to play. At the beginning of the second round, the fighting beasts were no longer just for show. When the battle really began, it could be seen that this was indeed a thrilling and cruel battle. Unlike the gorgeous show of the opening battle, it was a bloody and cruel beast-fighting activity to satisfy the slave owner's intention to have fun. The slave owners usually raised the fighting beasts to be fat and round, but a few days before the opening of the Colosseum, they would suspend feeding or greatly reduce the feeding of food. They deliberately let them have a little bit of hunger, because this would enhance the ferocity of the fighting beasts. When these strategically fed fighting beasts were brought to the entrance passage and walked into the battlefield through the opened heavy stone door, these greedy fighting beasts that had been trapped in one place for a long time were finally liberated. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they roared towards the sky. Their roars were like rolling thunder, making the entire Colosseum seem to shake. It gave the people in the stands a kind of hair-raising stimulation. The second game was played by the two senior slaves of Fire Hill City. Each battle did not limit how many people could participate, so sometimes there were more people participating in the battle, and sometimes there were fewer. Of the two slaves, one seemed to be physically weak, but it revealed a sense of cleverness and cunning, and its movements were agile when fighting. On the other hand, the other was a complete strength-type slave. Every strike of his was powerful enough. The cooperation of these two people made the battle more enjoyable, at least to the satisfaction of the city lords. Without the provocation of the beasts, the fighting beasts that were finally released urgently needed to release their killing intent. People killing beasts, beasts killing people, it was tense and exciting. Within the bestial battle arena, miserable screams, shouts, strange howls, and cheers were all connected together, forming a vortex within the bestial battle arena that sucked in everyone's emotions. It practically tore apart all other distracting thoughts, leaving only madness. At the end of the second battle, whether it was the fighting beast or the two slaves, they were all seriously injured. Both sides lost the ability to continue fighting. Finally, the Snowfield City Lord had to judge the end of the second game. As for who won and who lost, it was not important. The important thing was that they enjoyed the process. As for the rest, it was left to the people of Fire Hill City to worry about. After all, the slaves in the second game were their city's people, so losing the face of Fire Hill City was also a loss. Seeing the anger on the Fire Hill City Lord's face, the Snowfield City Lord's mood was better. The third game was a contest between the two beasts, between Shaki City and Skywheel City. In the gap before the start of the third game, the Luoya City King Su Luan let the slaves around him bring a message to Su Gu. Father asked you to prepare for the fourth game. Su Gu's face was complicated. If this collaborator fought to death, wouldn't he lose a lot of benefits? Xiao Xian was only slightly surprised when he heard this. He said that if Lei and Tuo were forced to play, he would also follow. But now, the third game had just begun, and the people in the fourth game had not been seen. How did Su Luan know? It seemed that Su Luan did not know anything about the arrangement of Baishur City. He had his means to understand. I know. Xiao Xian nodded. He had long been psychologically prepared and was not surprised. Also, Su Gu lowered his voice and said to Xiao Xian, Baishur City is preparing a horned lizard beast that has just been caught not long ago. It has not been enslaved, and its wild nature is very strong. Moreover, the horned lizard beast is not as easily angered as other fighting beasts. It knows how to judge the situation very well. If you intend to use any strategy to induce it to go crazy, and then find a loophole to start, you may not succeed. Su Gu told Xiao Xian about the desert horned lizard's habits and fighting methods. The horned lizard beast could rarely be trapped by people. The lure of food and other means had limited effect on them. At the same time, the horned lizard beast's rejection of other creatures was also very strong. If it met other people on the same battlefield, the horned lizard beast would certainly kill all these people, leaving no one alive. It is said that the Baishur king told several city lords that the arranged battle would certainly satisfy everyone. Su Gu said. Under normal circumstances, the beast fighting was a contest between several cities, such as the second and third game. But sometimes, it was arranged by the cities themselves, such as the opening battle of the first game, or the fourth game arranged by Baishur city. Can you predict it for yourself? Su Gu asked. No. Xiaofan replied. He also tried divination, but did not get an exact prediction. But he felt that something big was brewing. You have to be careful. If you can't win, then find a chance to avoid it as much as possible. Alas! Su Gu was not optimistic about Xiaofan. Even if the three people from Yanjiao played at the same time, even if they could use their peak strength, this was not the mountains or jungles. There was no place to hide, so they could only brace themselves to face it. Besides, Xiaofan's three people's strength was not very good. In other places, it was okay, but in the Colosseum, a place where the strong were like clouds, it was not enough to look at. Xiaofan's breakthrough to a senior totem warrior was not told to others. Therefore, Su Gu did not know that Xiaofan's strength had improved. Even if he knew, he would still not be optimistic. Okay, I'll go down first. Xiaofan pulled the hat on his clothes and followed Aisha to leave the stands. Behind the stands, there was a staircase leading to the bottom of the Colosseum. From there, they could reach the passage into the battlefield. Chapter 329. After walking down the steps, the surroundings seemed a little dark and empty. The window was located above the head, but the light that came through was limited. There were many slaves from the three major cities around here, probably to prevent any accidents. After seeing Xiaofan, those people stopped and asked. When they heard that he was going to play in the next game, they saw Aisha take out a wooden card given by the Luoya city king. They simply let him go, but they also reminded him, "You can't go in now. You have to wait, there are people from Baishur city over there." Xiaofan looked over. At the entrance of the passage, there were indeed more than a dozen people from Baishur city. Xiaofan wanted to see if there was Lei and Tua in the passage, but he was stopped before he got close. Baishur city and Luoya city were disgusted with each other and had a lot of grievances. When Aisha took Xiaofan down, he also called people to follow. Now the two sides were confronting each other at the entrance of this passage. "Is there anyone else in the next game?" Xiaofan asked loudly. If Lei and Tua were in the passage, they would respond. Sure enough, after Xiaofan's voice fell, Tuo's voice came from the passage. "Xian." Probably Tua wanted to come out, but he was stopped. "Xian, what are you doing here?" "Leave." Tua hurriedly said. "What are you shouting for?" The voice of the Baishur city people came from the passage, followed by the sound of fighting. Xiaofan's eyes were sharp, and he kicked the nearest Baishur city person. This kick also ignited the line of fire on both sides of Baishur city and Luoya city. The two sides looked at each other and suddenly fought. The guards of the three major cities around yelled and ran over, violently pulling the two sides apart. When the two sides stopped fighting because of the intervention of the guards of the three major cities, Xiaofan had already entered the passage. In the passage, the light was dimmer, but it was enough for Xiaofan to see the situation inside. Tua was standing against the wall. Perhaps he had just had a brief fight with the Baishur city people. He was standing there gasping for breath. Next to Tua, Lei was sitting on the ground, and it seemed that the situation was not good. He checked Rei's condition. His life was not in danger for the time being. Only a few of his ribs were broken and his internal organs were injured. Xiaofan gave Tua and Lei some of the medicine he had with him, and then looked at the others around him. Yes, in addition to Lei and Tua, there were 4 people Xiaoxian knew. 2 of them were from the Feather tribe and the other 2 were from the Tian Shan tribe. All 4 of them had different degrees of injuries. In addition to them, there were 4 other slaves with whip scars on their bodies. One of them had been chopped off at the wrist. It was estimated that they were the guilty slaves who had committed a crime and were thrown here by Baishar. Xiaoxian only knew that there were many people in the wooden box in Baishar city. He was not sure whether Lei and Tua were in it. Now it seemed that not only Lei and Tua, but also the other 4 tribesmen and the guilty slaves. Including Lei and Tua, Baishar city had prepared a total of 10 people, all of whom were going to play in the 4th game. To be exact, they were the sacrifices prepared for the 4th game. After all, in the current state of these 10 people, it was impossible to win against a specially prepared fighting beast. Taking advantage of this time, Tua told Xiaoxian about how they were caught that day. It was because they saw the Feather tribe and the Tian Shan tribe that they fell into the Baishar people's trap. Also, Tuo's face was solemn. Xian, that day I also saw the symbol of the Wanchur tribe. The Wanchur tribe had a relationship with the slave owners. Xiaoxian had long known that, but he did not expect that the connection was with the Baishar people. Were they all stones? In addition to these, we also saw Dao Yu. Tua couldn't bear to mention it. Lei and I couldn't beat him. Lei's injuries were caused by Dao Yu. Being beaten like this by a traitor who was once a wanderer, Lei and Tua felt that they had lost Yanjiao's face. They had no face to see the shaman and the chief. Now, in front of Xiaoxian, they also hung their heads low. Now is not the time to talk about this. Seize the time to regulate your breathing. Xiaoxian said. Tua and Lei wanted to say something, but were stopped by Xiaoxian. The remaining herbs were distributed to several other people by Xiaoxian. The spirit of the 4 people of the Feather tribe and the Tian Shan tribe was not very good, especially the 2 people of the Feather tribe. They were very young and had never experienced such a thing, with uneasiness and frustration. The people of the Tian Shan tribe did not have bows and arrows in their hands, and they felt that their confidence was greatly reduced. When they joined the travel team, they thought that they might die, but they never thought that they would face such a situation. Beast City. They would rather be eaten by beasts in the desert than die in such a place in humiliation. Suicide? It seemed that they did not have the courage. Lei and Tua had the courage to commit suicide, but they were not reconciled. Wasn't it just a beast fight? If they wanted to fight, then they would fight. For them, fighting to death was better than committing suicide. In the battlefield separated by a door, the sound of the beast fight clearly passed into everyone's ears, and their hearts trembled. The legs of a young warrior of the Feather tribe were shaking, and this was after their experience. If it was before the desert experience, they probably would have been unable to bear the pressure and howled. Escape from here? It was not that they didn't think about it, but at the end of the passage, there were layers of guards, and there were archers waiting above, so there was no way to break out. And what about them? They didn't even have a stone in their hands. How to fight? Were they looking for death? The vibration on the other side of the door was getting smaller and smaller, and it was not as fierce as before. After a few howls of beasts, everyone realized that the 3rd game was coming to an end. When everything calmed down, the passage was so quiet that even the sound of a needle falling could be heard. Even the sound of everyone's breathing could be heard clearly. There was a wind blowing, with decay and blood, as well as a chill that made people nervous and tremble. Not long after, a group of people holding weapons came from the entrance of the passage. The man in the lead had a malicious smile, pointing at Xiaoxian and others with the tip of his knife. It's time to go in. This sounded like, it's time to go on the road. Rumble, the heavy stone door opened, and the dazzling light made the people who stayed in the passage couldn't help but reach out to block it. Although some sand would be replaced after the end of each game in the battlefield, the blood left by the previous battles could not be erased. The guards behind urged them to go to the battlefield. If they didn't go, they would swing their knives, but they were blocked by Xiaofan. The guard who was blocked wanted to make 2 more knives, but Xiaofan said, "Why, do you want to go in with us?" The guard's movement paused and stepped back. He didn't want to go in and fight with the fighting beasts. Xiaofan didn't look at the others and walked into the battlefield. Lei and Tuo followed closely. The 4 people of the Yu tribe and the Tian Shan tribe looked at each other and could only lift their feet and walk in. The last 4 slaves were kicked into the battlefield by the guards. The heavy stone door closed, blocking their way back. Pa 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 pa. More than a dozen stone knives were thrown from the upper stands. The edges of the knives were sharpened, and the stone was good, medium and high. Several people who entered the field quickly grabbed a knife in their hands. The stone door at the other end of the battlefield opposite them opened with a bang, and a giant beast with conical thorns walked into the field unhurriedly. At the same time, on the other side of the Colosseum, where the fighting beasts entered the passage, there was a tall building where various fighting beasts that were about to participate in the Colosseum were locked up. They were opened and closed separately, and in one of the single rooms where the fighting beasts were locked, a beetle broke through the ground. Chapter 330. In the place where the fighting beasts were kept, in a warehouse-like house, a giant beast was lying there quietly. It was a bull with big pointed horns, and if the outside light was good, one could see the brown fur. It was the fighting beast that had appeared every year in Red Star City for the past 5 years, winning 5 battles. Because some of the patterns on its back were like flames, it was also called the Flame Bull by the people of Red Star City. This Flame Bull had been enslaved by the Red Star City Lord, and it was not the first time it had participated in the Colosseum. It had even been used as the finale many times. The sound from the Colosseum made it annoyed, but it was not crazy. There were also some drugs around that could make them temporarily calm down. There was not much light coming through the few holes in the slate, but the dim environment did not have much impact on it. Suddenly, it heard movement on the ground and looked over, only to see a bug crawling out of the ground. The Flame Bull did not pay attention to it. After looking at it, it continued to rest and prepare for the next battle. Just a bug, why bother looking? However, it did not pay attention to it. The bug was restless, biting and scratching every once in a while, and it was becoming more and more rampant. The shaking of the bull's tail could not expel it. The speed of the bug was quite fast. It was annoying. In order to participate in the battle, it would be hungry for a day or 2 like most of the fighting beasts. Although there would still be food supply in these days, it was much less than the previous careful breeding. In addition, after coming to the Colosseum, it had not eaten its favorite kind of grass. In the past, when it was in Red Star City, there were slaves who transported the grass every few days. But after coming here, it could only eat hay and some other plants that did not taste good. It was a little hot. The Flame Bull's 2 big nostrils spewed out hot air, and its calm mood was faintly fluctuating. On the other side, in the Colosseum, Xiaofan looked at the horned lizard beast that walked into the battlefield. Its body was flat, and its torso was oval. From a distance, it looked like a toad with thorns, but there was a tail behind it that was not long. The back of this horned lizard beast was dark sand, and its whole body was covered with thorny scales, like a sharp spearhead, like armor. In addition to those cone-shaped thorns, there were also some coarse scaled thorns. The horned lizard beast looked very fierce, especially the sharp short thorns. Even if it was only used for defense and not attack, it was enough to give people a headache. The horned lizard beast moved its 4 limbs and walked to the center of the battlefield. The roars from the surrounding stands made it very uncomfortable. It turned its stubby neck and swept around. Then, its sight fell on Xiaofan and the others. It had a reddish-brown head, and there were some dried red marks around its eyes, which made its eyes look even more strange, especially when it glanced at Xiaofan and the others. Looking into those eyes, Xiaofan could hear the people behind him gulping. He could even hear their hearts beating faster. Even Lei and Tua, who had hunted for many years, could not maintain the mentality of the previous hunting. There was no shelter around, this was a completely direct confrontation. The giant beast in the middle of the battlefield opened its mouth and roared at Xiaofan and the others. The sound was not as high-pitched as the previous beasts, nor was it the kind of heavy thunder drum sound. It was like the sound of a storm sweeping through the sand dunes. It made people feel their hair stand on end. With the roar, the rapid airflow blew up the sand on the battlefield. The oncoming sand made everyone's eyes narrow, but they did not dare to move away. They were afraid that if they moved, they would miss the opportunity to escape. "Xian, what should we do?" Tua asked. "Wait first." Xiaofan observed the horned lizard beast, recalling the information Su Gu gave him to determine the feasibility of the strategy. He didn't really want to fight with such a fierce beast here. If he really fought with his life, the already injured Lei and Tua would not be spared. From the previous two battles, he could see the destructive power of the fighting beasts in the battlefield. Especially Lei, who probably endured the pain while running, so his movement was naturally severely limited. After the horned lizard beast in the battlefield roared, it moved its four limbs and sped up its pace. It went to the place where Xiaofan and the others were. With every step, a lot of sand was kicked up. Xiaofan and the others had not yet moved, but the four slaves in the back began to shout and run away. The horned lizard beast was originally heading in the direction of Xiaofan and the others, but when it saw the people running away, it put its attention on the people running. Looking at its cumbersome body, each step was huge, and within a few steps, it had already caught up with the slave running in the front. The horned lizard beast did not stretch out its relatively short limbs, nor did it swing its not-so-long tail. Instead, it directly slid and floated sideways, hitting the stone wall next to it. Boom! Sand and stone splashed, and the stones on the edge of the wall were hit by the hard horns on its body. A lot of stone chips fell off. The slave running in the front was sandwiched between the horned lizard beast and the wall of the battlefield. One could imagine his end. The rest of the people felt their breathing stagnant, and the hand holding the knife was shaking. The courage that they had just gathered was scattered into slag under this collision. Oh good. Oh in the surrounding stands, the young slave owners were so excited that their faces turned red, and when they roared wildly, their faces looked ferocious. They heard that in addition to the four slaves who were obviously tanned, the others were tribal people, and this group of slave owners was even more excited. It turned out to be tribal people. Kill, kill, kill. Kill them. The shouts shook the sky. The horned lizard beast that hit the wall twisted its short spotted neck and looked at the others. The slave closest to the horned lizard beast did not dare to run forward again. Seeing the horned lizard beast focus on him, the slave did not have the courage to lift his knife and turn to run. This time he did not run around, but went back, toward the place where Xiaofan and the others were. But this time, the horned lizard beast did not immediately accelerate to chase. Instead, it took a step and shook off the stone and sand on its body. It did not look at the slave who had been squeezed into a meat patty. Step by step, it walked in the direction of Xiaofan and the others. Its eyes were slightly closed, and it looked somewhat absent-minded. After the scene just now, no one dared to relax their vigilance. Their nerves were tense, and their hearts were hanging high as they stared at the approaching beast. Looking at the approaching beast, a slave glanced at Xiaofan and the others who were still standing there. He gritted his teeth and ran out. However, after running a few steps, he stiffly stopped because he found that the horned lizard beast had focused its attention on him. The slave who was frozen there like a sculpture maintained his running posture. He did not dare to look directly at the other side. He only observed with his peripheral vision and did not care about the sweat dripping from his forehead. Seeing that the slave was no longer running, the horned lizard beast seemed a little disappointed and put its eyes on the place with the most people. After looking for a while, it suddenly took 2 steps forward. The 4 people of the Yu tribe and the Tian Shan tribe also wanted to stay with the 3 people of the Yanjiao tribe, so that they could share a lot of the pressure. But looking at the approaching beast, their hearts were also drumming, hesitating whether to stay away. Seeing the horned lizard beast step forward, the thunder-like impact flashed in the minds of several people, and their conditioned reflexes retreated far away. However, the battlefield was circular, and they were already close to the edge. Even if they retreated, they could only retreat along the edge of the circular arc. They thought that the horned lizard beast would make another thunderous impact, but unexpectedly, it took 2 steps, stopped, and roared again. The sand on the ground rushed straight to the place where Xiaofan and the others were. The 3 slaves could not help but retreat a little. They did not run, but moved step by step, trying not to attract the attention of the horned lizard beast. The people of the Yu tribe and the Tian Shan tribe had already retreated several steps. Now facing the impact of the sand, they retreated again. In this way, the closest to the beast were the 3 people of the Yanjiao tribe. Seeing this scene, the other 7 of the remaining 10 people in the field obviously took a breath. In any case, the first to face the attack of the beast must be the 3 of them. Tuo and Lei focused on Xiaofan. Xiaofan did not move, and they did not move. The outer cloth was blown back by the wind. Xiaofan pulled the hat on his head and lifted his foot in the direction of the beast. Xiaofan moved, and Lei and Tuo also moved. Probably feeling that Xiaofan issued an attack signal, Lei rushed forward with a knife. If it was during the hunt, he would not be so impulsive, but here, the pressure brought by the atmosphere pulled his nerves. After seeing the beast, he did not even think about leaving. Death is death, at least try to create some opportunities for Xiaofan and Tuo. If they could hurt the beast a few times, it would be better. However, Lei, who was going to try his best to fight, had not run a step, and was thrown to Tuo by Xiaofan. Xiaofan lowered his voice and said quickly, "You 2 stay here first. If I can't stop it later, you can act according to the situation." Tuo still wanted to say something, but Xiaofan waved his hand and continued to go to the beast. "What is he going to do?" a person of the Yu tribe said. "Is he crazy?" A person of the Tian Shan tribe recalled that in the tribe, when the shaman heard the news of the Yanjiao tribe, his evaluation was that the Yanjiao people were like lunatics. Now it seemed that the Yanjiao people were really crazy. They did not even avoid it, but went forward. Not only the other people on the battlefield, but even the slave owners in the stands also felt that the man in the strange hooded cloth was looking for death. Xiaofan, regardless of what other people thought, still went forward. His long sleeves covered his hands, so that people could not see whether he had a weapon or not. Xiaofan did not retreat, but moved forward, making the beast stunned. It also did not care about other people, and its 2 slightly closed eyes opened a little bit, staring at the approaching people. Others could not feel it, but it could clearly perceive the man's increasing momentum with each step. 20 meters, 10 meters, 5 meters, Xiaofan could even smell the muddy smell of the beast's breath. The beast looked at the approaching people, roared, and raised a front paw, about to slap Xiaofan. Xiaofan was faster, and also raised an arm. All the momentum that had been accumulating in this moment burst out. In his mind, the totemic flame fiercely rolled, and the outer shell of the totemic flame became brighter. 5 beams of blue flame came out of the inside, like dragons coming out of the sea. They swam along the meridians, unstoppable, rushed over the arm, and emerged from the front of the 5 fingers of the raised arm. Whoosh! The blue flame wrapped around the palm. The moment the flame appeared, the sand raised by the beast's roar, with Xiaoxian as the center, quickly shook out layers of visible ripples in all directions. Chapter 331. This was the first time that Xiaoxian showed the blue flame in public. Although this was not a good idea, after revealing the blue flame, he would certainly be targeted by more slave owners. However, after thinking about it, this was the best way. After the blue flame appeared, the slave owners, who were originally excited in the stands, seemed to be strangled, one by one. That is. Isn't he a tribesman? How could there be a slave owner? Yes, who is that guy? I can't see clearly with a hat. As slave owners, they knew what such a blue flame represented since they were sensible. If they could not make such a blue flame, they would not be a real slave owner. Such a blue flame was a symbol of slavery. It was the proof of a slave owner. Not only the young slave owners, but even the several city lords could not help but straighten up. The people who were still sitting lazily, absent-mindedly tasting the wine, and the people who were intimate with the beautiful concubines, all turned their eyes to the battlefield. In particular, Su Gu, who originally had some worries, was now so shocked that his jaw almost fell. Slave owner? What a slave owner! No one knew better than him that Xiaoxian was a tribesman. A real tribesman. When he was in the oasis, he also saw Xiaoxian's totem pattern. How could he be a slave owner? At this time, Su Gu suddenly remembered that Xiaoxian had asked him a question: can a tribesman enslave a slave? How did he answer at that time? Impossible? Su Gu stretched his neck and looked at the scene on the battlefield. He rubbed his eyes. It was indeed the blue flame. On the Baisher side, Dao Yu, who originally saw Xiaoxian on the field, was still sneering in his heart. He wanted to see the tragedy of the three people. At this moment, his face changed again and again. He now suddenly regretted it. How could he ignore such a person? He was sure that the kid was a real tribesman. Because of this, his heart was faintly worried and afraid. If he had known this, he would certainly not hesitate to get rid of this big threat first. The Baisher king now wanted to throw his cup. What about a tribesman? How could he become a slave owner? What, you said that was a tribesman? Bastard! Do you think I don't have eyes? Could the tribesman be enslaved? Could the tribesman make such a blue fire? Fuck, that fire is even bigger than mine. The White Stone King felt suffocated. Several slaves around caught a glimpse of the White Stone King's gloomy eyes and quickly lowered their heads for fear of being angered. However, the White Stone King loves his face. Even if the arrangement goes wrong, he has to endure it for the time being. He can't fly into a rage immediately. Otherwise, he will be laughed at by the other city lords for his ability to control the situation. Therefore, Baisher Wang not only could not vent now, but also had to put on airs, as if everything was under his control. On the battlefield, Xiaoxian faced the giant beast and raised his arm. The flame on his palm floated against the sand and air currents towards the giant beast. He was like a predator that had smelled delicious food, ready to make a move. The horned lizard beast lifted its thick forelimb. At the moment when the blue flame appeared, it froze. The roar stopped and roared again, several times in a row, as if to demonstrate to Xiaoxian. To be able to get a giant desert beast to demonstrate its power, it must have classified them as a threat. The previous roars were just its way of venting and teasing. Now, the roar was a show of force. It stared at Xiaoxian, looking at the blue flame with fear. Xiaoxian raised his head slightly. Because of the hat on his head, the people standing on the high platform could not see Xiaoxian's face, but the giant beast saw it. On Xiaoxian's face, the dark totem patterns that were originally exposed became as red as magma. If there were no clothes to cover it, you could see that the totem patterns in other places on Xiaoxian's body were similar. After a series of roars, the giant beast lifted its forelimb and moved. Just when the people in the stands thought that the giant beast would show its power and smash the boy who dared to show the enslavement flame in front of it into a meat patty, they found that the truth was not what they thought. The giant beast's raised forelimb not only did not move forward, but fell back. It was retreating. Such a giant beast, it actually retreated. People who have enslaved fighting beasts know that they will resist when enslaved, so many people will let slaves help control them when enslaving them. But what about the one off the field? Why did it retreat? This was only known to the horned lizard beast that faced Xiaoxian at close range. Those who were far away would not be able to feel the power, but it could clearly feel it. No, it can't go over. So, it chose to retreat, roaring as it retreated, as if facing a great enemy. Taking a step back shows that it is timid and afraid. At this time, Xiaoxian once again took a step forward, even more imposing and decisive than before. The blue flame in his hand once again floated to the giant beast's side. Xiaoxian knew that after this horned lizard beast was caught, it became cautious and ate a loss. Naturally, its attitude towards people was more careful. After entering the battlefield, the first step it did was just to test the strength of the people on the field and the hardness of the surrounding walls. The people here did not seem to be strong and did not pose much of a threat. It also tested the hardness of the walls and found that it was difficult to break. It temporarily put its eyes on Xiaoxian and the others, wanting to vent. But now, it was aware of the threat, but the line of its heart did not collapse. At this time, it could not show fear and hesitation. The more powerful Xiaoxian was, the more the giant beast would doubt itself. Yes, Su Gu said that this beast was very smart, but the smarter it was, the more it would think. It was not like some fighting beasts, which were straightforward and did not think much about the style of fighting directly. Dao Yu and the people of Baishur City did not think that they would deliberately pick such a tricky beast, but instead, it helped Xiaoxian. Listening to the roar of the giant beast now, compared to the strength at the beginning, it now sounded like a fierce appearance but weak inside. Seeing Xiaoxian pressing on, it continued to move back. Its tail hit the wall, so it had to turn in another direction and continue to retreat. The successive roars continued to lift the sand on the ground, as if to blow out the fire in Xiaoxian's hand. However, this round of sandstorms could not break through this layer of barrier. Moreover, the fire from the fire seed could not be blown out by the wind and covered by the sand. How could it be extinguished by the roar of a fierce beast? One retreated, one advanced. Xiaoxian pushed the horned lizard beast from one side of the battlefield, step by step, to the middle of the battlefield, and continued to push. It was not only the other people on the battlefield who were stunned, but even the countless experienced slave owners in the stands who were watching the war were also stunned. What was this situation? This beast city rarely seen in hundreds of years. Who the hell is that kid? He looks more arrogant than the Snowfield's young master Ah. Could it be that Baishur City specially arranged this? Is it one of the Baishur City's young masters? Whoever he is, hurry up and fight Ah. That fighting beast, it's a waste to have such a fierce appearance. The slave owners in the stands did not know what expression to show. There were even people who threw items in their hands, such as pottery, stone tools, etc., at the giant beast in the battlefield, trying to arouse the giant beast's anger. However, after being smashed, the giant beast was indeed angry, but it was not directed at Xiaoxian. Instead, it turned its head in the direction of the smashing. It roared angrily, and the airflow rushed to the stands. The young slave owners who threw things in the stands quickly pulled the slaves around them in front of them. After roaring at the stands, the horned lizard beast turned its head and continued to retreat until its tail touched the wall of the battlefield. Xiaofan had forced the giant beast from one side of the battlefield to the other side of the battlefield. There was no way to retreat. Some places around the giant beast's eyes began to stir, and its eyes even began to turn red. Xiaofan guarded against the giant beast's final counterattack. He saw the changes around the giant beast's eyes become more and more obvious. The sense of swelling became stronger and stronger, and the redness around the eyes became more and more intense. Whoosh! 2 blood-colored liquids splashed from the giant beast's eyes. The battlefield exuded a strange smell of blood. Although it did not feel very unpleasant, it inexplicably made people feel that their stomachs were stirred, which was quite uncomfortable. It was not only the people on the battlefield. The wind carried the smell and drifted to the high stands. The slave owners who had been eating and drinking before directly vomited. Those who did not vomit also had a face full of vegetables. They could not wait to find a place to avoid it. However, the Luoya city king Su Luan laughed out loud at this time. He was happy to see the people of Baishur city suffer. No need to watch anymore. This 4th game is over. In the desert, if the horned lizard beast encountered a beast that it could not match, it would spray blood from its eyes to drive away the beast that posed a threat to its life. This horned lizard beast, when it was besieged and captured by the people of Baishur city, also had such a situation because it was extremely afraid. The red marks around its eyes when it was on the field were left behind at that time. Now, just one person made its eyes bleed again. To what extent was this fear? And on the field, who was the person who forced the horned lizard beast into this field? Even the Luoya city king was puzzled. Was it really from the tribe? In any case, when they saw the horned lizard beast's eyes bleed, the experienced people knew that this beast fight could not go on. It would be a waste of time to drag it out. However, although he understood it in his heart, the Snowfield King was not very pleasing to the eyes of the mysterious person on the field who was better than his son. He waved his hand. This fighting beast is not good. It has ruined everyone's interest. The Snowfield King's words were a naked slap in the face of the Baishur King. Before the start of this game, the Baishur King had said that he would make everyone happier. And the result? The words, spoiled everyone's mood, were 2 merciless slaps on Baishur King's face, which was loud enough. He did not look at the Baishur King who was full of hostility. As the person who presided over the overall situation of this year's beast fight, the Snowfield King thought that Baishur city was a poor ghost. Catching such a good-for-nothing waste was really disappointing. In that case, I will let you see the ability of my Snowfield city. Change it to my Snowfield's fighting beast. Standing up, the Snowfield King cleared his throat. Although the Colosseum was big, he could let his voice spread to every part of the stands. Since the Baishur King's beast is a waste, then my Snowfield city will make up for it. Come, the Snowfield King's words had not yet finished when he heard a beast cry not far away. Moo, the Snowfield King, who was interrupted, was slightly angry in his heart. With an unhappy face, he paused and continued, come, bring, moo. There was another beast cry, this time louder than the previous one. The Snowfield King's face was even more unhappy. He snorted discontentedly and then said, bring us, moo. This third sound even overwhelmed the voice of the Snowfield King. Interrupted one after another, the Snowfield King was so angry that he threw his cup and stared at the Red Star City side. This cry was from the flame bull of the Red Star City side. Although they were far away and there was a battlefield between them, the Red Star City Lord could still feel the sharp gaze that was like a substance. Many people from other cities also looked at the Red Star City side. With a slight cough, the Red Star City King turned around and said a few words to a few capable people next to him, letting them take care of it, but not to hurt the bull. Turning his head and not speaking, there was another loud roar of the beast. Others looked at the Red Star City King. The Red Star City King was about to say, I have already sent people over. But just as he was about to speak, he suddenly slammed on the brakes. Huh! That's not right. This cry is not from our family's bull, it's more like the one from Snowfield. Hearing this, everyone looked in the direction of Snowfield City. Standing there against the wind, the Snowfield King, wearing a white fur coat, was particularly conspicuous. The Snowfield King, whose face was blue because of the interruption, was even more blue now. Chapter 332. The first three cries that interrupted the Snowfield King's words were indeed from the famous flame bull of Red Star City. However, the following cries were not. The Snowfield King really could not refute this. How could he know that before he could say a few words, his own fighting beast would tear down his stage? The Snowfield King's cloudy face was full of anger. He raised his hand and waved. The two slaves around him quickly withdrew to deal with the fighting beast and see what was going on over there. Seeing the two big slave owners of Red Star City and Snowfield City lose face, the Baishur City Lord had long had a face full of vegetables. The slave owners of several other cities were gloating in their hearts. You deserve it. Who told you to blindly show off? However, they did not show off for long. Soon, a series of beast roars sounded, not only from the bull of Red Star City and the fighting beast of Snowfield City, but also other cries. The roars of the beasts were getting more and more intense, louder and louder. The people here were all experienced people and knew a lot about fighting beasts. Even if they were not clear about their daily habits, they could feel the emotions expressed by the sound. At this moment, the continuous roars of the beasts were full of anger and irritation, as if they were going to turn the world upside down. Accompanied by the sound of impact, it was like the fighting beasts were hitting a stone wall. This was not a good thing. What's going on? This time, they could not sit still and no longer paid attention to the battlefield. Is it possible that there is a fight in the beast pen? Several of our city's beasts are over there. Hurry up and send someone over to see. Pay attention, even if you hurt others, you can't hurt the fighting beasts of our own city. The beast war is not over yet. All the big and small slave owners let the slaves around them check the situation. The Snowfield King looked at the already chaotic stands and took a deep breath. Everyone be quiet. This roar successfully attracted the attention of the slave owners, and the noisy field suddenly quieted down. Seeing this, the Snowfield King was a little satisfied. Looking at the situation in the battlefield, he raised his hand and reluctantly said, "The fourth beast war is over, prepare for the fifth." As for the hooded man who could send out the enslavement fire, they would send someone to understand. In a hurry, it was better to stabilize the field. Inside the battlefield, two heavy doors opened. Originally, they thought that they would not be able to get out alive after entering. However, when they saw the heavy stone door slowly opening, they felt a kind of excitement. The three slaves took the lead and rushed out. The four people of the Feather Tribe and the Tian Shan Tribe looked at the three people of the Flaming Horns Tribe and quickly walked out. Xiaofan watched the horned lizard beast being pulled out by nearly 20 sturdy high-level slaves with thick rattan ropes. The giant beast was also very happy to be able to leave this place, so it did not resist and was very cooperative. Since the beginning of the beast battle, even the fighting beasts that could get out of here were all injured and exhausted. It was rare to see such a fighting beast that almost maintained the same appearance as when it entered the arena. The only difference was that it was bleeding again. When the giant beast left, Xiaofan turned around and went to the other door with Lei and Tua. When they walked out of the door, Xiaofan quickly whispered to Lei and Tua, "Let Cha-Cha take you away later. It will soon be chaotic here, and no one will take care of us for the time being." Lei and Tua looked at Xiaofan in surprise. They did not quite understand the meaning of Xiaofan's words. However, since Xiaofan said so, they would do as he said. The scene on the battlefield not only surprised the slave owners, but also the two of them. They heard others speculating that Xiaoxian was a slave owner, but they did not believe it. Xiaoxian was a person who was favored by the shaman. He was also an elder of Yanjiao and was recognized by the ancestors. Whether he was a slave owner or not, Xiaoxian was a Yanjiao person anyway. The roar of the beast, as well as the sound of impact, still showed no signs of stopping, but became more and more intense. At this time, in the large warehouse where the flame bull was locked, the flame bull was stomping the ground with its hooves. Damn it, where was the bug that annoyed the dead bull? How did it disappear into the ground? While it was stomping on the ground, the beetle that had driven the flame bull to the brink of insanity had silently drilled out from the corner. It then quickly flew towards the back of the flame bull, grabbed it firmly, and bit it. It even used its hook-like front claws to stab with all its might. The flame bull screamed again. Moo, damn it, the bull was pissed off. Bang! The two thick horns on the swinging bull's head once again hit the stone wall next to it. Those stone walls could only block for a while, but they could not withstand the crazy collisions of the fighting beasts. After all, this was not the Colosseum. The people who were sent there to understand the situation listened to the fierce roar and impact, and did not dare to open the stone door so easily. Just as they were thinking about how to calm these fighting beasts down, they heard a bang somewhere. The stone wall of the tall building that had cost a huge amount of manpower and material resources, and had buried hundreds or even thousands of slaves, was finally knocked down. Around the collapsed stone wall, the people standing there saw that the flame bull's eyes had turned into a strange red color, and its big nostrils spurted out a burning breath. The slaves standing outside could clearly see the two white streams of air that were spurted out. A small slave owner and more than a dozen slaves rushed to appease the flame bull. When they saw this scene, they said at the same time, "Oh no! What happened in the end that made this bull so angry?" The flame bull had a characteristic. Their eyes would change color with emotion. When its eyes turned red, it meant that it was angry. The darker the color, the greater its anger. At this time, the flame bull's eyes had become almost blood red. It was like a red-hot stone, and whoever caught it would be scalded. This state was very suitable for the battlefield. However, this was not the battlefield, nor was it the time to fight. The flame bull's blood-red eyes looked at the people outside, and its hooves were digging on the ground. As soon as they saw this scene, the people of Red Star City were shocked. "It's going to attack. Go find the king. Quick!" This flame bull was enslaved by the king, and only the king could calm it down. If others wanted to stop it, they could only work together to kill it. But before that, the Red Star City Lord said not to hurt the flame bull, so the solution could only be to find the king. The flame bull let out a long cry, lowered its head, pointed its horns forward, and rushed out. The main culprit who had angered the flame bull had already moved to another place and started the same thing again. There were many fighting beasts in the surroundings. The task that Xiaoxian had assigned to it before was to provoke the anger of the bull. 2 days before the opening of the Colosseum, Xiaoxian wandered around the Colosseum and heard about the flame bull of Red Star City. It had a 5-year winning streak and an irritable temper, which was in line with Xiaoxian's plan. In order to see the beetle's obedience and ability to execute, Xiaoxian also specifically checked it. That day, he had been locked in the house, only occasionally going out to pick up something and then returning to the house again to examine the beetle. He gave the beetle a small piece of a very ordinary branch and let it take it to the ground near the corner outside the house. The beetle also completed the task very well, 3 times in a row, which made Xiaoxian begin to rejoice in enslaving such a beetle. He said to Sapphire that after this matter was over, he would unlock the second lock. In fact, after Xiaoxian determined its ability, he also wanted to unlock the second lock, but the time from the first lock was too short. According to Su Gu, if the time interval between the 2 unlocks of the slaves was too short, it may not be good. There were even cases of death. Therefore, Xiaofan did not immediately unlock it, but promised to unlock it later. In fact, in addition to the big blue beetle, there were also a large number of beetles in the other places where the fighting beasts were locked. Although they did not pose any threat individually, once the number increased, it would be different. This was also the reason why the other fighting beasts began to be anxious and angry. The Colosseum would be open for 2 to 3 days before and after the full moon, and there were about 10 battles every day. Most of the fighting beasts that appeared in these battles were locked up in the place next to the Colosseum. After all, there may be some small changes before the fighting beasts. Therefore, it was not only the fighting beasts that appeared on the first day, but also the ones that appeared on the second day. And now, these battle beasts that were finally pacified and locked up to prepare for battle were all going crazy. At first, it was only 1 or 2, but soon it was like a chain reaction, driving the mood of the other fighting beasts. The fighting beasts, whose tempers were not very good, became even worse. What's more, this time there was a factor that ignited their anger. Boom! Another stone wall was knocked down. And this was also like a prelude. After this, a stone wall was knocked down and the stone door was knocked open. Under the rage of the fighting beasts, less than 10% of their rationality remained. The first to bear their anger, in addition to the slaves guarding this side, was the Colosseum. However, there were many protections in the Colosseum, and there were also high walls blocking them. They could not attack, so they turned to other directions, rampaging in the Beast City to vent their accumulated anger and murderous intent. The guards of the Beast City were composed of people from the 3 cities. It was impossible to say that they were absolutely harmonious. Coupled with the fact that the loopholes in the order were not very solid at the moment, they were instantly in a mess. The competition in the Colosseum could not be carried out because of the rioting fighting beasts outside. The slave owners, who were still emotional before, did not dare to leave at will. They could only stay here and wait for the king and the slaves to deal with the fighting beasts outside. It was not until the afternoon that the situation outside was barely stabilized. The frightened little slave owners who were hiding in the stands of the Colosseum were no longer in the mood to continue watching the fighting beasts. Under the escort of the slaves, they returned to their respective stations. Xiaofan's group did not follow them to the Luoya city station. After Su Gu brought the message, they found a place to rest first. "Xian, are we not going to enter the Luoya city station?" Tuo asked. "Not for the time being," Xiaofan said. "Why? Are you worried about the Luoya city king's suspicion?" "More than that, I'm worried that something big will happen. If it really happens, it's a good opportunity to leave." Xiaofan looked at the full moon in the sky and said. Chapter 333. The effect of the closed fighting beasts was more intense than Xiaofan expected. One was that Xiaofan underestimated the ability of the sapphire, and the other was the weather. When the moon was full, it was the time when the beasts were most prone to riot. However, the slave owners liked to see the furious beasts fighting each other. For them, only in such a situation, the battle was fierce enough and good enough to watch. He just didn't know, after experiencing the collective riot of the fighting beasts, when they went to the Beast City again, would there be a psychological shadow? Xiaofan stood on the high sand ridge, looking at the distant Luoya city station, and the Beast City further away. This night, Lei and Tuo had a rare good sleep. During the time of being caught, they had been on guard, nervous, and always on guard. Until now, with Xiaofan and Cha-Cha, they were finally relaxed. Sleeping well could restore them quickly. After midnight, Xiaofan saw a bird flying into Luoya city. Not long after, a small group of people rushed to Luoya city. Looking at their almost silent but fast running, Xiaofan guessed that these people were sent by the Luoya city king to investigate the news. Something must have happened to make these people rush back in such a hurry. The next day, Xiaofan went to find Su Gu alone. He did not take Lei and Tuo with him, letting them find a place to rest and recuperate. He first determined whether there was someone chasing the three of them. In particular, Dao Yu. Xiaofan showed his hand in the Colosseum. Even if other people did not care, Dao Yu would certainly have an idea. In such a time when there might be a more intense storm, it was always good to be careful. However, what Xiaofan did not expect was that he learned a surprising news from Su Gu. The Baisher king is dead? Well, someone came to report last night. Father asked me not to leave the station, and would leave here as soon as possible. Su Gu was a little tired. At first, he was curious as to how Xiaofan was able to create the enslavement fire. However, under such circumstances, a tribesman was relatively unimportant. What's more, Su Gu now needed Xiaofan's help. Naturally, it was impossible to push him too hard. Xiaofan pondered over Su Gu's words. The Baisher city lord, the king of that city, was actually killed? Yesterday, he was still angry in the beast fighting arena. How did he get slaughtered when he returned? Do you know who killed him? Xiaofan asked. Su Gu shook his head. I don't know. How about Dao Yu? Xiaofan asked again. I don't know, but I heard that one of the Baisher king's 3 close guards died. After a pause, Su Gu added, it seems that the one who died was not Dao Yu. After the riot in the beast fighting arena, another city lord was killed. This time, the beast fighting arena was doomed to not continue. At first, when he heard the news, the Snowfield king was still clamoring to investigate why the fighting beasts rioted and how the city lord was killed. However, in the afternoon, there was news that the Snowfield king had left with his people. In the original words of the Snowfield king, I have an urgent matter. Whoever wants to care about it, I don't care anyway. What happened in the end that could make the Snowfield king so anxious? Xiaofan wondered. I heard that the Snowfield city side seems to have lost a very important thing. Su Gu said. A very important thing? Xiaofan asked. I don't know what it is. I'm still inquiring. However, it is said that it may be related to your tribe. Su Gu said. Xiaofan's eyelids twitched. What were the hidden purposes of the other tribes? His previous guess was that they were looking for metal ores. Could it be that they had succeeded? The people of the Feather tribe and the Tianshan tribe who came back with them that day had already left overnight yesterday. They did not say hello to the people of Luoya city. Even if he wanted to ask, he could not find anyone. If it's really related to your tribe, then you have to avoid it early. Our Luoya city has taken in a lot of tribes. Su Gu said. Things were the same as what Su Gu said. In the afternoon, near dusk, the Luoya city king gathered his people and left with everyone. There was no one left in the station. Originally, Xiaofan wanted to let Cha leave with Lei and Tuo first, but Su Gu took the initiative to let Lei and Tuo go with them. In the 2 days before and after the full moon, the desert was very dangerous, so it was better to be careful. Xiaofan thought about it and agreed. On the day they left the beast-fighting desert, the Luoya city king saw the 3 of them and did not say a word. As for Baisher city, after their king was killed, the young masters of Baisher city and the small slave owners left with their slaves. It was too dangerous here, so it was better to go back to the city first and then fight for the throne. Not only Baisher city and Luoya city, but people from several other cities also left one after another. They seemed to be aware of the coming storm and left in a hurry. The people of several cities left, leaving only the original guards of Beast City. The guards of the 3 cities were already on guard against each other. A Snowfield city guard left here went out to release water at night. The desert at night was bright because of the moon in the sky. The guard went to a beast fighting pit. There were a lot of beast corpses piled up in the pit. Most of them were the losers of the beast fighting war in the past 2 days. If it was in the past, these corpses would have been given to the slaves to eat. But now, they had all withdrawn, leaving too many corpses behind. They were all thrown in a beast fighting pit. After another 10 days, only the bones would be left. There were scavenger birds and other insects around, which would digest these corpses. Yawning, the guard looked around. Except for his own companions not far away, he did not find other people from other cities. This made him feel relieved and he planned to urinate. Just as he was about to urinate, he suddenly heard some fine sounds. He quickly looked around and found no other abnormalities. Then he listened carefully. Those sounds were coming from under the beast fighting pit. Could it be that there were still beasts in the pit that had not died? Thinking of the riot in the beast fighting pit, the guard swallowed his saliva. He held the handle of his knife and stretched his neck to look inside. Then, he saw some black beetles coming out from under the beast fighting pit. One by one, they quickly wrapped up the corpses of the beasts piled up at the top. If that was all, the guard found that the corpses of the beasts in the pit were quickly thinning. The originally strong muscles became dry at a speed visible to the naked eye. Even if he had seen the scavengers in the desert quickly eliminate the corpses, it was also caused by the joint action of many birds and other animals of all sizes. But now, in this pit, there was only one kind of beetle. They were frantically gnawing, and the black armor on their backs reflected the cold white light of the moon. He had guarded the beast fighting pit for so many years and had never seen such a scene. According to the previous years, such a large number of beast corpses would take about 10 days. But looking at the current situation, it would take less than 10 days. There was no need to wait for the sun to come out tomorrow. These beast corpses would be eliminated and only hard bones and thick scales would be left. The guard standing outside the pit had cold sweat on his back. He felt that his scalp was frozen. He shouted and ran to his companions to talk about what was happening in the beast fighting pit. Insects? You mean those little beetles? It can't be, right? Some people doubted. It's true, it's true. If you don't believe me, go and see. The other guards were puzzled and planned to team up to see. They were really frightened by recent events. 1 or 2 of them did not dare to run around. However, when they went to see in a group, there were no more black beetles in the pit. Not a single one could be seen. However, the corpses of the beasts had obvious signs of being gnawed and shriveled. How come they're gone? They were just here. The guard walked around the pit, looking for them but did not find any. Under the sand, a group of beetles that had just gnawed on the corpses of the beasts had left, following a big blue beetle and leaving the beast fighting pit. The next day, when the sun rose, only a few seemingly harmless beetles were left in the beast fighting pit. Most of them had disappeared. Chapter 334. The Snowfield King, who left the Beast City behind, took his people and rushed back to Snowfield City overnight. Standing in the secret underground palace, the Snowfield King's eyes widened as he looked at the small open space under his feet. Originally, the things that should have been placed here were gone. Staring at the palm-sized pit under his feet, the Snowfield King's bloodshot eyes looked like the angry flame bull of Red Star City. The fists hanging on the side of his body were clenched. His whole body was full of terrible hostility, making the people behind the Snowfield King not dare to breathe. After a while, the Snowfield King gritted his teeth and said, "No matter who it is, no matter how many people are involved, I want them all to die." After leaving the underground palace, the Snowfield King issued a kill order: if you meet a tribesman, kill. Kill 1 and you'll be rewarded, kill 2 and you'll be promoted. The more you kill, the more rewards you'll get. At the same time, the Snowfield King was still investigating who stole the treasure. He had always looked down on the tribesmen. Therefore, although his men said that there were traces of tribesmen's activities, he still thought that there must be other people involved, such as the people from the other two cities, or other restless small cities. It was not only the snowfield city that was brewing a storm that was about to unfold, but also Luoya city. Xiao Xian and the other two followed Su Gu back to Luoya city. Before entering the city, they found that the city's defense had been raised by a level. The whole place was filled with a solemn and uneasy atmosphere. After entering the city, this feeling was even more intense. Even the two royal sisters in the city, who were usually arrogant, stayed in their own residence. There were slaves guarding outside the house day and night. As soon as Luoya city's king Su Luan returned to the city, he called his 3 sons over and scolded them. The general meaning was, "Now is a special time. I don't care how you usually fight, but now you should settle down. Whoever dislikes having long arms and legs, I don't mind personally chopping them." Su Gu's 3 brothers did not doubt Su Luan's words. Su Luan really didn't care about the feelings between father and son. There were many beautiful women around him, and there were many lovers in other tribes. If he really wanted to have descendants, he would let them live again. Su Gu's 3 brothers were clear about this. Usually, they were muddle-headed, but now they had to stay awake. After Xiao Xian and the other 2 entered the city, they returned to the tribal area of Luoya city. In the past, even if other tribesmen went out, there would still be people in this place. But now, not a single person could be seen. The doors and windows were tightly shut, and there was no sound at all. Could it be that they went back early? Didn't you say that we would leave together after everyone came back? Ray was dissatisfied. He was very unhappy that those people had abandoned the 3 of them and left. No, even if the traveling team leaves, there will always be someone to stay behind. Tuo frowned as he looked at the situation in front of him, feeling more and more uneasy. Xiao Xian pointed at the empty area and asked the person next to him, "Where are they?" Next to him was Su Gu's slave. Although his heart was very repulsed by Xiao Xian and the other 2, he still maintained a polite surface for Su Gu's sake. When he heard Xiao Xian's question, he replied, "They left the day before yesterday." His tone was contemptuous and angry, as if those people had done something unforgivable. Xiao Xian didn't care about the slave's tone. He opened the door and walked into their Yanjiao house. He found a piece of leaf with words by the window of the room, which was stuffed through the gap in the window. Looking at the handwriting, it was left by Huang Yi of the Mang tribe. There were 2 sentences written very briefly, meaning that the situation was urgent and they left first. If Xiao Xian and the other 2 came back, they should also leave quickly. They actually left first. Ray said angrily. Tuo was a lot calmer. He never expected other tribesmen to have the same attitude as his own tribe. Just as Xiao Xian looked at the leaf, Cha-Cha outside also called out, and then came over with a feather. This feather was inserted on the roof of the house where Xiao Xian and the others were. Cha-Cha could recognize the other party from the smell of this feather. Is this the feather of the Hui tribe's mountain eagle? Xiao Xian took the feather and found that there were also words left on the feather. The words above were, "Leave as soon as possible." The Mang tribe and the Hui tribe both left such words. No matter what happened, no matter what serious situation those people made, it was most important to leave immediately. The slave sent by Su Gu had been sent away by Xiao Xian, so now there were only 3 of them in the room. When they came in, Xiao Xian found that the people in the city were very wary of them. Near this house, he didn't know how many pairs of eyes were staring at them. The reason why they hadn't started yet was probably because of Su Gu. If they wanted to leave without permission, it would probably be difficult. There may be something big happening in this desert. It's not something we can get involved in. You leave first. Xiao Xian said to Lei and Tuo. What about you? Tuo asked. I will stay here for a few days. You go first and let Cha-Cha take you away. Xiaoxian said. This won't do. It's too dangerous for you to stay here alone. Lei and Tuo were unwilling. In the tribe, Xiaoxian was valued. They knew in their hearts that Xiaoxian was still an elder. How could they leave the elder here and let the two of them run away first? Xiaoxian did not immediately answer. He rolled up his sleeves and mobilized his totem power. The flame pattern extended from his shoulders, over his elbows, over his forearms, and then rushed over his wrists. Lei and Tuo's faces were sluggish. Their mouths opened twice before they said, Xian. You've improved? Tuo recalled, before the Colosseum, you've already improved, right? No wonder I felt that your momentum was different at that time. At that time, Tuo's attention was more on the giant beast. When he stared at Xiaoxian, he did not pay attention to Xiaoxian's momentum. At that time, Xiaoxian wore long sleeves that covered his wrists. They did not see the totem pattern on Xiaoxian's wrists. Even so, it's too dangerous for you. The other tribes followed several senior totem warriors and ran away. How can you stay here safely? Tuo and Lei were still not at ease. Su Gu sighed, I still need to help him. I'll leave you here so you can leave. Moreover, you're still injured. Xiaoxian said. Thinking of their current situation, Lei and Tuo were somewhat discouraged. Otherwise, we'll leave first and wait for you on the road. When we came here before, didn't we pass through a rocky area? We'll rest there and wait in that place. 10 days, Xiaoxian looked at Lei and Tuo. If you wait for 10 days and I still don't appear, then leave first. Tuo and Lei still wanted to say something, but were stopped by Xiaoxian. In addition, I also plan to go to Baishur city to take a look. Taking advantage of the chaos there, I'll find a chance to deal with the traitor Dao Yu. With such a threat, Xiaoxian did not dare to go back to the tribe with ease. He was familiar with the Wanshur tribe. In this upcoming big storm, he did not know what role Dao Yu would play. Dao Yu must die. Although Lei and Tuo were very reluctant, they still did it according to Xiaoxian's arrangement. Xiaoxian went to find Su Gu. Su Gu did not pay much attention to Lei and Tuo. The two could not help him, so he readily let them go. He recently planned to enslave another group of people, as long as Xiaoxian stayed. After Lei and Tuo were taken away by Cha-Cha, Su Gu went to find Xiaoxian. He wanted to enslave another group of slaves. After seeing Xiaoxian's enslavement fire, Su Gu also communicated with Xiaoxian. However, Xiaoxian had not yet enslaved people, and for the time being, he did not intend to enslave people. Su Gu was somewhat disappointed. He also wanted to see if Xiaoxian could successfully enslave people. This was a rare talent for the tribes. This person actually did not use it. Such a good talent. Su Gu thought. Xiaoxian did not tell Su Gu about his enslavement of the beetle. After assisting Su Gu to successfully enslave 20 people, he finally left. Su Gu was quite reluctant. I know that this time's matter actually has nothing to do with you Yanjiao people. However, I still want to remind you to be more careful. It is said that the Snowfield King has issued a kill order to the tribes, so that the people of Snowfield City, as long as they meet the tribes, will directly kill them. Isn't your Luoya city worried about the Snowfield King coming to kill you? You have taken in the tribes. Xiaoxian asked. Su Gu thought about his father's attitude. It seemed that he was not worried at all. Recently, his father's beautiful concubine had changed, and every day was very happy. Chapter 335. When Xiaoxian left Luoya city, the camel brought from the Rain tribe spontaneously followed Xiaoxian. Originally, Xiaoxian thought that the camel was reluctant to leave him, and knew that it was not good to stay in the city, so it wanted to follow him. However, after leaving Luoya city, Xiaofan saw the camel shake its head and make an ong sound, as if it was saying bye-bye, and then went to other places. The direction was completely different from Xiaofan, and it did not care about Xiaofan at all. Xiaofan stared at the camel's figure, quickly walked over, and untied its reins, leaving only a bag of water hanging around its neck. Xiaofan had a water bottle and a stone that Yang Sui gave him, so he left the other bag of water to Mud. Patting Mud's neck, Xiaofan said, "Good luck, don't get eaten." There were also some wild camels in the desert. Xiaofan had seen them several times when he went into the desert with the expedition team. They were all in groups, walking on the ridge. In the scorching desert, the view was somewhat distorted. Mud, who seemed to be in a good mood, raised its head slightly and made an ong-ong sound. It faced the wind and sand and slowly walked away, the tuft of long hair on its head fluttering in the wind. Xiaofan saw the camel's figure disappear from his sight and sighed. He looked at the reins in his hand and put them into the bag. He pulled his clothes, which were almost the same color as the desert, and quickly walked in the direction of Baishur City. The reason why White Stone City was called White Stone City was because the place where it was located, there were a lot of white stones exposed in the desert. In the desert, few rocks could withstand the continuous blow of flying sand and stones. The rocks exposed to the surface of the ground showed a variety of strange shapes under such grinding. When he saw the many white stones in his field of vision, Xiaofan knew that he was not far from Baishur City. Perhaps there were still people from Baishur City patrolling around, so he had to be careful. Xiaofan learned from Su Gu that after the death of the Baishur City's lord, the Baishur City's young lord brought people back to Baishur City and began to fight for the throne. Now there was a civil war. What was the cause of Baishur's death? Who killed him? Ironically, after his death, his children did not put in much effort to investigate the cause of his death or find the real culprit. They only cared about fighting for the position of city lord. While Xiaofan was on his way to White Stone City, inside a stone house, blade-praying mantis's ashen face looked like it had shrunk. Not a single part of its exposed skin was intact. Its face was covered with wrinkles and all kinds of muscle necrosis injuries. It looked a little scary. Especially his left arm, which was wrapped in a thick cloth and emitted a very strong smell of herbs. His entire person looked extremely weak, as if he was suffering from a serious illness and was about to die. Wow! Dao Yu once again spat out a mouthful of blood. Lying on the wooden bed covered with thick animal skin, he forced a smile as he looked at the person in front of him. Young lord. Seeing Dao Yu struggling to get up, the Baishur City's young lord, who often looked for Dao Yu to discuss things, hurriedly said, "No need to be so polite. Just lie down." His line of sight swept over Dao Yu's terrifying face. Not daring to stay for half a minute, the Baishur young lord resisted the disgust in his heart and still maintained an amiable expression. His face was worried, as if he was worried about Dao Yu's injury. That day, the Baishur king was killed. The white stone card that symbolized the king's identity was also lost. Dao Yu went to track the murderer. Although he did not find the murderer, he picked up the white stone card and handed it to the young lord. No one doubted that Dao Yu would kill the Baishur king. In their view, Dao Yu did not get any benefits from killing the Baishur king, nor did he have the ability. How powerful was the Baishur king? How could he be killed by a slave? Seeing Dao Yu chase the murderer and make himself look like a ghost, they knew that the murderer was not caught, but was poisoned. When he received the white stone card from Dao Yu, the young lord's heart was very happy. With this stone card, he would have more confidence in competing for the throne in the city. Looking at the weak person on the bed, if it was a normal day, the Baishur young lord would certainly not care much about him. First, Dao Yu's current appearance looked too scary. Moreover, Dao Yu now seemed to have been wasted. On the day he came back, he looked fine, but as the days passed, his condition became more and more serious. Fortunately, he hid it from others. Most people in Baishur city did not know about Dao Yu's condition. The Baishur king's 3 guards, one of them died, leaving only Dao Yu and another one. The 2 of them supported different young lords. Although he was only a slave, at his current level, he knew too many secrets and had too many subordinates. Before obtaining the throne, even the Baishur young lord had to think twice before making a move. Now, Baishur city was still divided. If the other party knew about Dao Yu's condition, they would certainly take the opportunity to make trouble. Therefore, the Baishur young lord concealed Dao Yu's condition. Dao Yu wanted to recuperate at home, so the Baishur young lord was happy to do so, as long as Dao Yu did not go out to meet people. Enduring a few words, the Baishur young lord really could not stand Dao Yu's festering face and the smell of medicine here. After learning what he wanted to know from Dao Yu's mouth, he hurriedly left on the pretext that he had something to deal with. When he left, the Baishur young lord was still thinking, as soon as he took the throne, he would execute this slave. After the Baishur young master left in a hurry, Dao Yu, who was lying weakly on the wooden bed, sneered and changed to a comfortable position on the animal skin. He then unwrapped the cloth that was wrapped around his hand. This arm had been covered with festering wounds. Many of the muscles were necrotic, and the festering places could even see the white bones, which was very scary. With some difficulty, he moved his hand. The sharp pain made Dao Yu tremble all over. However, Dao Yu did not care about this. Instead, his eyes showed expectation and irrepressible excitement. I didn't expect the core seed to be so powerful. Dao Yu's eyes were burning as he looked at the festering hand that was almost only left with the bones. Poison? That was a treasure. A treasure that made the world crazy. So many people wanted to get it, but he, Dao Yu, got it. Just as he was thinking about the stolen treasure, Dao Yu suddenly heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Who? His fierce eyes swept over, only to see a person in a cloak. As soon as he saw this person, the expression on Dao Yu's face suddenly changed. The fierce look in his eyes also converged, and his festering face changed expression. If his face was intact, he could also see a respectful expression. Completely without the previous weak appearance, Dao Yu turned over from the bed and knelt on one knee, bowing his head in salute. It looks like you've succeeded. The person in the cloak said faintly. This was a woman's voice. The sound was like the spring water flowing through, seeming to be cool. Yes. Dao Yu slightly raised his head to look at the person in the cloak. His words were cautious, that core seed, you take it yourself. The cloaked person did not care. Thank you, young lord. Dao Yu's eyes burst with joy. Shi Shu also has a word for me to bring to you. If you can take down Baishur city will also belong to you. After a few simple words, the cloaked person left a bag of herbs and left silently. Dao Yu carefully held the bag of herbs and personally boiled it. He drank all of it, leaving no dregs behind. These would allow his injuries to heal faster. After drinking the medicine, he looked at the dark sky outside the window. Dao Yu called 2 people, whispered a few words, and then jumped out of the window. Chapter 336. Xiaofan was in the Baishur desert where Baishur city was located. He met 2 groups of people patrolling outside, but looking at their absent-minded appearance, he wanted to know the situation in Baishur city. Moreover, according to the information that Xiaofan learned, in the past, the patrols outside Baishur city were much stricter than they were now. The patrolling people would not be in such a listless state. However, it was also understandable. For the slaves, Baishur city was now a very critical time. The death of the big slave owner meant that their biggest master was gone. Who would take over, who would become their next master, everything was still uncertain. They were full of worries about the future development. Easily avoiding these absent-minded guards, Xiaoxian also paid attention to some creatures around, such as birds, small beasts, and so on. They could be another eye of the Baishur people. Who knew if there would be people enslaving insects in Baishur city? It was better to be careful. After arriving at a large rock, this rock looked like a mushroom with a large umbrella-like top. This was because during the sandstorm, large grains of sand scraped closer to the ground, slowly grinding away the parts of the rock that were close to the ground. That was why it looked like this. Hiding below, Xiaoxian temporarily did not have to worry about being discovered by the birds above. Near night, there were no people patrolling around. Going forward, he would soon reach Baishur city. Xiaoxian intended to take a rest first. Drinking some water to restore his physical strength, Xiaoxian thought about the plan to mix into Baishur city. As he was thinking, his brows wrinkled. He had been thinking about how to mix into Baishur city, but the premise was that Dao Yu was in Baishur city. But what if Dao Yu was not? What would he do in the city? Thinking about it, Xiaoxian cut a section of the reins from the camel. He intended to use this section of the rope to calculate the position of Dao Yu, but he did not know if it would be successful. After the divination was completed, Xiaoxian opened his eyes and looked at the knot in his hand. He read the conclusion above and compared it to distinguish the position. His fingers drew on the ground and finally determined the indicated position. However, this direction was not the direction of White Stone City. No matter what, Xiaoxian decided to go and take a look. Fortunately, he had done a divination before sneaking into Baishur city. Otherwise, it would have been a waste of time. After changing directions, Xiaoxian quickly headed in the direction indicated by the conclusion. Without Cha-Cha's help, Xiaoxian's speed in the desert slowed down, but it wasn't slow either. As they walked, Xiaoxian discovered that they were already out of the White Rock Desert. At such a critical time in Baishur city, Dao Yu was not in the city. What was he doing running so far away? Xiaoxian continued to move in that direction. He only rested for a short while during the night before continuing his search until he arrived at a certain place. This place looked no different from any other place in the desert. As far as the eye could see, there were sand dunes of varying heights. Even the relatively flat areas looked like the surface of a lake that had been disturbed by the wind. The wind here was slightly stronger, causing sand and dust to fly. Xiaoxian looked at the mountain-like sand dunes in front of him and then looked around. He didn't see anything suspicious, but according to the conclusion, it should be around here. Did he have to continue moving forward? Not only because of the conclusion, Xiaoxian also had a very strange feeling. He always felt that there should be something here. Continuing to move forward, climbing up the mountain-like sand dunes, the strange feeling in his heart became even more intense. In Xiaoxian's mind, the shell wrapped in the fire flashed. Such a change made Xiaoxian stop. Just as Xiaoxian was puzzled, he suddenly heard a soft sound. Although it was the sound of the surrounding wind blowing the sand, after Xiaoxian's upgrade, his hearing had also increased. He could distinguish other sounds from those noises. It was obviously not the sound of sand blowing. Xiaoxian quickly lay down on the ground and pulled his hood up. He looked in the direction of the sound. The sound was very soft in the sand, like the sound of stones being moved. It was very careful, as if the person who made the sound was on guard against something. Xiaoxian lay there patiently and stared in the direction of the sound. The surrounding sand blew against Xiaoxian's body, quickly covering him in a layer. Soon, Xiaoxian discovered that between the two sand dunes in front of him, there was a crack in the ground, and the sand was sinking in. The gap grew wider and wider until it was wide enough for one person to pass through. Only then did Xiaoxian see a person quickly jump out from the gap. The person looked around cautiously, but didn't find anything. Only then did he wave downwards. Xiaofan saw a person come out from the crack. It seemed that someone was helping to deliver the person underground. However, after the reckless person was handed out, the crack in the ground closed. The person who came out first looked around, then dragged the reckless person into the distance. Xiaofan thought for a moment and walked along the ridge under the cover of the sand. Although he couldn't follow closely, he could at least see where the person went. The person walked a distance and went around to the back of a hill. Then, he dug a hole in the sand with his hands and pushed the person in. Before burying the person, he took off all the clothes of the person who was pushed into the hole and compared them with his own body. It seemed that he wanted to keep them for his own use. The man put away the clothes he had taken off and filled the hole with sand. He looked around before returning to where he had come from. Xiaofan watched as the person returned to the place where he came out. He pushed away the sand that had covered the hole and knocked on the stone slab. After the stone slab was moved away, the person said something to the person below and went down through the crack. The stone slab closed again, and everything returned to normal. The wind quickly carried the sand and covered the place, making it impossible to see anything unusual. Xiaofan remembered the place and came to the place where the person had just dug the hole to bury the person. He pushed away the sand and saw the buried person. Previously, the person was dragged face down, so Xiaofan couldn't see his appearance. He could only see that it was a person. Now, Xiaofan found that the person not only had a face, but also had many festering necrosis on his body. It looked very scary, and there were also traces of bleeding from his nostrils and other places. Xiaofan couldn't see how the person's injuries were caused. There were no tattoos on his face. If there were no festering wounds, he should be a tall and muscular man. In the desert, even if he was a low-level slave, he was still a good laborer. What was under that place? Xiaofan was very curious. If Dao Yu was here, what was his purpose? Xiaofan lurked around, waiting for an opportunity. Around noon the next day, the desert weather was hot. Xiaofan was still hiding behind the sand ridge. His body had been covered with a layer of sand. Not caring about the heat of the sand, Xiaofan stared at the other side. He heard a little movement. Soon, the place opened again and another person came out. It was not the one Xiaofan saw last night, but he did the same thing. After the other person came out, he also dragged the person to the distance, intending to dig a hole to bury the person. Xiaofan's sudden appearance startled him. Before he could make a sound, he was grabbed by the throat and his two arms were removed. Xiaofan looked at the slave lines that appeared and disappeared on his body and found that this person was a slave of Baishar. Chapter 337. Looking at the other person's frightened eyes, Xiaofan whispered, "I'll ask you a few questions. Answer obediently." The other person nodded again and again. Xiaofan loosened his grip on the other person's throat. Seeing the other person breathe a sigh of relief, he asked, "What is Dao Yu doing down there?" The other person suddenly looked up. Obviously, he did not expect Xiaofan to directly mention Dao Yu's name. The fear in his eyes deepened. He was obviously very afraid of the name Dao Yu. Xiaofan once again grabbed the other person's throat, as if to directly break it. The man nodded and shook his head, as if he had something to say, but could not make a sound. When Xiaofan released him again, he coughed non-stop. "Speak. Here, die." The man's frightened eyes suddenly dissipated, leaving only a murderous look. He took a step back, twisted his body, and swept his leg like a whirlwind toward Xiaofan. At the front of his leg, his toe was clamped with a sharpened bone. If it was cut, he did not know how much blood he would lose. However, Xiaofan had long been prepared. He did not move forward, only his hand moved. A wooden thorn pierced the other person's neck. This was something Xiaofan found in the desert. It was a kind of tree with hard thorns all over. The thorns also had a certain hardness. Xiaofan also smeared poison on the thorns. The person who was stabbed would be like a deep drunk and then fall asleep. After the man fell, Xiaofan added a knife and buried him. Then he came to the place where the man had just come out. Following the man's practice last night, he brushed aside the sand and buckled the slate there. The slate opened a gap, and the person inside looked outside, but did not see anyone. He doubtfully opened the slate a little more and stretched his head to look outside. As soon as he exposed his head, he felt a sudden pain in his neck and his vision quickly blurred. After the man fell, Xiaofan waited for a while. When he didn't hear any movement from below, he went down through the open crack and helped the unconscious man to sit down. He made a pose for him to look as if he had fallen asleep. Xiaofan pulled the stone slab close and looked at the lock behind it. He also saw a polished stone stick next to it. Xiaofan picked up the stone stick and stuck it there. This way, he could prevent people from outside from pulling the stone slab and coming in. After the stone slab was pulled up, the passage below was completely dark. There was a torch nearby, but Xiaofan didn't need it. The passageway was nearly 2 meters high and less than 1 meter wide. Xiaofan listened to the movements in the passageway and walked forward. The dark environment was not much of a problem for him. He just needed to change his field of vision. They walked until they reached a fork in the road, where there were 3 branching paths. Xiaofan intuitively chose one. The deeper he went, the brighter the shell wrapped in totemic flames in Xiaofan's mind. But at the same time, Xiaofan also had a very uncomfortable feeling. Every nerve in his body was screaming for danger. This danger did not come from people, but from other reasons. The deeper he went, the wider the passageway became. There was wind flowing in the passageway, which proved that there should be other exits. This place didn't look like it had just been built. It looked like it had been built for a long time. Moving forward, Xiaofan found that there were many warehouses here. There were people guarding the warehouses with a torch. 3 people were sitting on the ground next to the torch. However, looking at their slightly lowered chin, they were all dozing off. Xiaofan sneaked into one of the warehouses. The 3 people guarding outside did not notice. The warehouse had no door to block it. There were many stones of different sizes inside, and the quality of the stones was not bad. They were at least mid-upper grade. Xiaofan's first thought was that this was the place where Baishur City stored stones to make stoneware. But thinking about it, it didn't make sense. There was no need to hide the stones so far away. They hid it so well, as if they had other plans. At this moment, Xiaofan heard a noise outside. He hid behind a few stones, and then observed the situation outside through the gaps of the stones. A group of people came in from outside, holding torches to illuminate the inside. "Hurry, hurry, hurry, move a few more," someone said. "Move more? There are already a lot of stones there. Swordmaster told us to move, so let's move quickly. He's watching over there." The sound of stones being moved came from one of the warehouses outside. Someone said in a low voice, "I heard that a few more died. Their bodies are all rotten." Hiss. "Do you think we'll become like them? But as long as we survive these few days, we'll be able to improve. This is what Swordmaster promised. He will tell young master." Those people moved the stones and gradually left. It was dark outside again. The 3 guards outside talked for a while. One of them went to urinate and left temporarily. This was the place where the stones were placed, so they didn't dare to scatter them here. Of the remaining 2 guards, one yawned and continued to sleep. His spirit was particularly bad recently, while the other looked at his companion who was sitting on the ground and dozing off. The skin on his face began to fester, and his heart became more and more afraid. He knew in his heart that his companion would not last long. Just when he was upset, he suddenly heard the sound of stones falling. Startled, he went over to look but didn't see anything. He returned to his original place and continued to think. Xiaofan had come out of the warehouse and quickly left. The sound of the stones falling to the ground was made by him. Xiaofan remembered the direction of the people who moved the stones and went directly there. The sense of danger was getting stronger and stronger, which may be related to the cause of those people. What was hidden here? Was the sword master in those people's words Dao Yu? Just as Xiaofan continued to sneak in, Dao Yu looked at the small thing not far away, his eyes fanatical. Around Dao Yu, there were many large and small stones piled up. The stones were at least medium. This place was originally built by the Baishur city's former Baishur king to hide gems and also as a cemetery after his death. In order to build such a palace-like cemetery, hundreds of slaves died. The remaining slaves were all killed after the underground palace was built. Therefore, very few people knew about this place. Only the Baishur king who took over could know about it. Others, even if they knew that there was such a place, did not know the exact location. Later, the dead former Baishur king opened this place again and threw his deceased ancestors' bones and coffin into the corner. He also turned this underground palace into a place to hide stones. Because he knew a secret that the three major cities had been hiding. He also thought that one day, he could steal things from the three major cities. Unfortunately, before the former Baishur king could implement his ambitions, he was killed by a partnership. Probably, he never thought that the one who finally picked up the bargain would be the slave who followed him. There was more than one traitor. Of the 3 close guards, 2 betrayed and the only loyal one had been killed. Dao Yu looked at the thing that was not much bigger than a fist. It was the core seed that the Baishur king had been thinking about. With the help of Shu, he stole it from the snowfield city when the tribesmen were causing trouble. Being allowed to leave the core seed, he was really ecstatic. The shiny weapons used by the 3 major cities, such as the armor and weapons used by the snowfield's young master that day, came from the core seed. The core seed could turn stones into ores, and then extract the needed things from these ores. These were all his in the future. This was Dao Yu's underground palace alone. Was he afraid of the Yanjiao tribe's revenge? At first, when he heard the news of the Yanjiao tribe, he was naturally worried. But with the enhancement of his strength, with more and more things in his hands, and knowing some secrets about the tribe's fire seed, he could not see the tribesmen. The slave owners would be the future overlords. And he, Dao Yu, would also try his best to become a slave owner. Thinking that Xiaofan had such an ability, Dao Yu's mood suddenly became hazy, but soon became happy again. With Baishur City and the core seed, he did not have to be afraid. If he really could not solve the difficulties, he could still go to Shu. There was a cleansing in the desert. After this cleansing was over, there may be no 3 major cities. As for how many other cities could exist, Dao Yu did not know. However, Luoya City may continue to exist, and the Baishur City that Dao Yu took over. No, it could not be called Baishur City in the future. It had to be changed. Dao Yu, who was fantasizing about a better future, did not know that the most unpleasant person was coming to his side. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.